Yay, there we are. Welcome, everyone. I'm Edwin Rutsch. I'm the director of the Center for Building a Culture, of the new Empathy Center located here in Santa Barbara. You can see it behind me. Our mission is to build a more empathic culture and society and to raise the level of empathy within the world. And I'd like to welcome you to this 4-day Empathy Summit. This is our first day, organized by or co-hosted by myself and Anita Nowak, who you see sitting next to me. We have 40 authors participating in this event, and they'll all give a summary of their books, talk about their books. I have 10 minutes each to talk about their books and what they hope readers will take away from reading their works. And I want to just mention that we are recording this session, and the video will be available online at the event website. So next, I'd like to introduce Anita. Take it away, Anita, my co-host.
Thanks, Edwin. Good morning from Montreal, Canada. My name is Anita Nowak, and I'm excited to be co-hosting this incredible 4-day summit with my dear friend, Edwin. I've known Edwin for more than a dozen years. We met at a TEDx conference devoted to compassion, and we instantly bonded over our shared passion and preference for empathy to change the world. Today, I teach at McGill University, and I'm the author of Purposeful Empathy. I also host a weekly podcast and YouTube series by the same name that amplifies the voices of people from around the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank all our incredible authors who will be presenting today.
And thanks, Anita. And next we'll have a slideshow of our partners and sponsors. Yes, we'd like to thank our partners and sponsors and extend our gratitude. They're either sponsors or financially supporting our work, as well as our partners do cross promotion, and you can also become a partner with us. So we hope that you'll become a partner and support these ongoing summits that we hold every couple of months. And also would like to thank our volunteers. We have a whole team of volunteers who work really hard, diligently to produce these summits. And next we have a little bit about our empathy, the overview of what we're going to be doing today. There we go. There's our slide. We have our speakers. We're going to speak for the next about the next 2 hours. And then at 10:10 Pacific time, we have an empathy circle. And it's the empathy circle. You'll be hearing, the first part, you'll be hearing from the authors. So you'll be just an audience listening to them. And then at the last 2 hours, we're having an empathy circle, which is a practice which I find is the most effective first step gateway practice for learning and practicing empathy skills. And different communities have different practices. For example, the mindfulness community, the compassion community has meditation as a core foundational practice. And I really think that the empathy circle based on active listening is the core of the empathy movement that we're working to build. So then our event will end in 4 hours, which is 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Anita?
Beautiful. So thank you. We'll explain how the summit will unfold in real time. So Edwin will introduce each speaker for the first hour, and I will introduce speakers for the second hour. Each author will have 10 minutes to present, and they will address 3 key questions. So what is their book about? What motivated them to write it? And what do they hope readers will take away from the book? At the 9-minute mark, we'll give a 1-minute notice and call time at 10 minutes. And that's because we have 12 wonderful speakers and want to respect the schedule, giving everyone a chance to speak for their 10 minutes. I also want to mention that if you're joining us today, you have the opportunity to win free books after the summit that have been generously donated by the authors. Some are sending hardcover copies, some are sending ebooks, some are sending audiobooks. But to qualify, you need to fill out the feedback form, which has been posted or will instantly be posted to the chat group. And Edwin, I think we're just on time to introduce our first speaker with the little gift of 2 minutes. I'm going to invite everybody who's joining to add to the chat why they are here today. What's motivating you to join this first day of the Empathy Summit? And Edwin, in a minute, will introduce our first speaker. Back to you.
Okay, so let's begin. Yeah, and again, you need to fill out that feedback form to be able to win the books. There's going to be ebooks. There's going to be hard copy books that some authors will sign and send to you. And there'll also be audio books. So you have really a chance to win quite a few books here today. But you have to fill out that feedback form, and that feedback form will be posted periodically to the chat. And you want to fill that out after you leave the summit. So okay, so next we have our first speaker, and we have Seung Lim, aka Slim. I've always known him as Slim. He is joining us all the way from South Korea, which is currently at I think 1:10 a.m. in the mornings, and it looks light there, but you must have artificial light. And Slim is coaching venture-backed founder CEOs. He helps them scale their business to the next level with clear strategy without sacrificing their health or becoming mired in interpersonal challenges or feeling drained by people's problems. And he's the author of Realizing Empathy, an Inquiry into the Meaning of Making. And he's going to be giving away 10 audio books to participants. So take it away, Slim, and welcome.
Thank you. Should I share my screen from my end?
You can, yeah. Sure.
Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yep.
So I spent all of my 20s working as a consultant. I consulted for companies that were struggling to grow their business through innovation. And I felt a great deal of compassion toward the CEOs of these companies. And I wanted to help alleviate their suffering. So I did my best to give them advice on how to grow their company through innovation. But when it came time for them to actually follow through on the advice I gave them, they sometimes refused. And at first I was merely disappointed, but when the pattern repeated itself over the next 9 years with multiple companies, I eventually became resentful. I started to develop hate for the CEOs of these companies. CEOs who lacked courage to introduce new products and services to the market. CEOs who did not appreciate the hard work I put in for their own good. So I eventually said, enough is enough. I no longer want to help these CEOs innovate. I wanted to be the one to lead the innovation. And then with the help and encouragement of a mentor, I stumbled upon the idea of becoming a graduate student in fine arts, where I would not only be the one to lead my own innovation projects, but also conduct research on the principles of effective leadership for innovation. And this book is a byproduct of that research. So at its basics, the book summarizes the various realizations I had during my research. Realizations in particular of empathy. Hence the title of the book, Realizing Empathy. I define realizing empathy as an event that happens when we suddenly empathize with someone, including ourselves, or something through an unexpected realization. And what makes realizing empathy different from merely having empathy is, well, the realization, the kind that often makes us go, aha, oh, or maybe even burst out with laughter concerning something we either did not or had incorrectly assumed to have understood or appreciated enough. It's not much different from growing up and remembering something your parents had told you when you were a child, and all of a sudden going, oh, that's what mom was talking about. Now, what I find both surprising and a little bit, shall I say, embarrassing, is that writing my book helped me see how judgmental I had been toward the CEOs of the companies for whom I consulted in the past. That despite the compassion I felt for them, the actions I took to alleviate their suffering, in hindsight, weren't actually helpful to them. At least as not as much as I had thought. And people often say that the process of innovation is filled with VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But it's more nuanced than that. It turns out the process of innovation is filled not only with volatility, but also anxiety. Not only with uncertainty, but also loneliness. Not only with complexity, but also overwhelm. Not only with ambiguity, but also shame. When I was consulting, I had not experienced these emotions to the same degree or for the same reasons as the CEOs for whom I had consulted in the past. And having now had the experience of leading innovation myself, if I could meet the CEOs for whom I consulted in the past, I would apologize. I would admit that I was wrong, that I did not know enough to sufficiently understand and appreciate their situation. That had I known that they were feeling these emotions, and had I understood and appreciated why they were feeling these emotions, I would have served them in a fundamentally different way. Now, whether or not you read the book, what I hope to leave you with today is this. Whenever you find yourself judging yourself or others, I want you to know that you have a choice. You can either continue judging yourself or others, just as I spent all of my 20s judging the CEOs for whom I consulted, or you can acknowledge that you're having a difficult time realizing empathy with whoever or whatever it is you're judging. Now, to be clear, you can choose the former. The choice is yours and yours only. I respect your choice. But if you want to choose the latter, I want you to know that having difficulty realizing empathy does not mean you're a bad person. It does not mean there is something wrong with you either. And it most certainly does not mean that it's your fault. What I want to express is that the mere fact that you've chosen to suspend judgment is in and of itself something I appreciate. Because it is only after we suspend our judgment that a door opens. One that could invite us to experience a sense of wonder, the kind that is inspired by the paradox that lies in front of us. The kind of paradox that when dissolved, leaves us with a whole new perspective with which to see. Now, let me show you a video to make clear what I mean by a sense of wonder inspired by a paradox, because it's a mouthful. Watch carefully. Now, I don't know if I can see everybody's hands, but raise your hand if you've made a judgment about the phenomena you just saw. For example, you may have told yourself that you know why that ball is behaving that way. Oh, it's because of magnets, or whatever the rationale that you believe that you understood as. Now, raise your hand, put your hand down. Now, raise your hand if you find yourself having suspended judgment. For example, you may be telling yourself, whoa, how is this possible? According to the laws of physics, this should not be possible. But I'm seeing with my own eyes that it is.
We
It's a
have 1
paradox.
minute. Sorry, 1 minute left.
Yep. What am I missing? Great, I'm seeing some hands. So if you belong to the latter camp, I want you to know that that's what I mean by feeling a sense of wonder inspired by a paradox. And as Dr. Lipset, whom I interviewed in my book, has said so eloquently, we mature when what we once assumed to know takes on more subtlety and nuance, thus changes in meaning. In other words, I believe that the challenges we all experience in realizing empathy is also an opportunity for maturation. Maturation much less related to our age and much more related to the choices we make in response to the challenge that we face.
That's the time.
All right, so this is the video that I'll just leave you with, if you're open to the realization. May you stay wonderful. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Slim. And I forgot to mention, I'll be giving a 1 minute heads up, 1 minute to the end of the speaking time. So just a little reminder about that. So our next speaker is Natalie Petouhoff. If we can bring Natalie up. Hi.
Hi.
And Natalie, we got a screen share, is a customer experience employee experience is a customer experience, employee experience, as well as an AI consultant and speaker. She is also a Wall Street Journal best-selling author and is the co-author of Empathy in Action, How to Deliver Customer Experience at Scale. And she'll be offering 1 ebook of her book for the winner. So take it away, Natalie.
Thank you, Edwin. Actually, I don't know if you saw my update. We can give away 25 ebooks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Good morning or afternoon or wherever you are. It's my honor to be here to spread more empathy. And I thought I'd give a little bit of talk to kind of some of the content in the book and some of like the evolution of how I got to this place. So I work in customer service and employee experience, and this is a typical customer experience. Press 1 for a real person, press 2 for someone who knows anything, and press 3 for anyone who's really going to talk to you. And it's kind of a typical experience, right? We're all customers. It's very frustrating. And if you do actually get to talk to someone, you usually hear some sort of apology. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I know how disappointing this is. And we all know that it's a script that's written by someone in an ivory tower. And the problem with treating customers this way is it makes us feel like we don't really matter. It's not really sincere. And honestly, at the end of the day, there's a feeling of invisibility. The research shows that 80% of executives believe they provide a great experience, but only 8% of customers agree. And so what's been fascinating is this research has been repeated over the last 20 years, and we keep getting the same result by different research firms. So it's interesting that there's still such a gap. This is a typical employee experience, but it's kind of I love Ted and his cartoons. Before we start this round of brainstorming, I'd just like to remind you that all the ideas that are not mine will be rejected. And this is something that I write about in the book called Not Invented Here. And it's, kind of think about like you've been in a company or in a meeting and you make a suggestion and your boss just shoots it down. They're not really open, or they take the idea and they make it their own. And besides, you can feel really angry. It also makes us invisible. And so one of the things that I found was when empathy is lacking, there is a sense of and a feeling of feeling invisible. The research shows that 77% of the workforce is quiet quitting, meaning they show up, but they don't really put in 100%. And that means for every dollar that companies spend, they're really getting 23 cents of productivity. And there's tons and tons of news articles every single day about what CEOs think about this. But my guess is that it has a lot to do with the culture that we've created over the last 100 years in corporate America. Globally, the research shows that 50% of the world's employees have one foot out the door. Translation, they're really looking for another job. And the research also shows that 77%, that quiet quitting group, they know what they would want to have changed, but no one's really making those changes. And so again, we find a gap between what employees are feeling and how they feel about their culture and whether they show up for work. So why does it matter? Well, in my research, what I found was there's a common thread, and many times where we feel invisible. We don't feel seen, we don't feel heard or acknowledged. And it matters more today. My theory is that the pandemic gave us all a huge cause for pause. And in those quiet moments, we asked ourselves really big questions about what we want for our family, for work, and for our lives. And quite honestly, I think people are very frustrated and they really don't want things to stay status quo. And so these are some of the reasons why I wrote the book. And because I think it taps into a deep need for us to be able to share the feeling that you get when you're seen and heard and witnessed. You feel acknowledged. And that witnessing is really very transformative. When I talk to companies, when you talk about empathy, right, I talk about the ROI of empathy, but a lot of executives think it's the soft stuff, right? And so when I work with companies, with executives, we're really looking at creating empathy strategy for their people, their process, as well as their technology. And AI is something that is helping us or can help us employ more empathy, but we really do have to look at the strategy of how we're doing that. The research shows for a medium-sized company, employee disengagement and attrition could cost $280 to $355 million in lost productivity. And poor customer service means that they're losing double that in current revenue and future sales. So part of what I try to do is really look at the economics of empathy, to be able to help people realize that the reason for looking at empathy really does make a difference to the bottom line. Work is a place where most of us spend a lot of time, but honestly, the statistics show that in many cases, work is not someplace that we want to go. And there's lots of articles about how executives think that people don't show up because they're lazy, because they don't care. But in reality, it's because people are disenchanted by the cultures. And oftentimes executives, I've been in many, many meetings where they think the customer is the problem. But truly, it's when they buy something, they're either disappointed in the product or when they get customer service, it's not really service. So we really need a new model for business. And one of the things that I wondered about is how did we get here, right? Because a lot of the things that I talk about seem to me like common sense, and yet it continues to happen. It's when I started working almost 30 years ago, and I'm fascinated that while there are sometimes some things better, but it's still happening. So I have this analogy about when you're going 60 miles an hour, a blind spot can put the things that we care about at risk. But what if you could see something that you couldn't see before? Might that be valuable? And so one of the things that I talk about is the economics of empathy and really looking at when you run a business. How does this change how you run a business? How does it change how people feel about that, whether the customers or employees, and really look at the economics of how it's going to transform. So we're connecting how people feel to the bottom line. So let's look at two of the most important assets, customers and employees. What's fascinating is without employees, right? There's no one to create products and services. And without customers, there isn't anyone to buy them. And yet their experiences, their value is really not accounted for on the P&L. So one of the things I talk about when I work with executives is leading with empathy. And it's really that cognitive adaptability to really look at people's ideas, their feedback, and their concerns, and to create a culture where it's psychologically safe, meaning there's no repercussions from being honest. And I really believe that it starts with leaders and it starts with employees, and then how you treat employees ends up flowing into how you treat customers. So what if, right? What if we put the focus on employees, and what happens is the employer becomes the employer of choice, and they're able to retain the top talent who's productive, motivated, and innovative. And then things like quiet quitting will not be happening. And with those employees, they can provide experiences for customers who want to buy more over a lifetime, and those customers provide a higher customer lifetime value, as well as do the employees. So when we're really looking at being able to see, hear, and feel and acknowledge the people in our businesses, in the long run, it really saves money and increases the profit and revenue.
1 minute.
Thank you. To become an empathy practitioner, it's really a new kind of leadership. And really what motivated me to write the book is really looking at being in cultures that really weren't very fun or productive, and really trying to change that. And I hope that you enjoy the book, and I'm really, really thrilled, and it's been great to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Rob Volpe. And we can bring Rob up. Rob is an empathy activist, a keynote speaker, and a trainer, and he has identified the 5 steps to empathy, which he brings to life in his award-winning book, Tell Me More About That, Solving the Empathy Crisis One Conversation at a Time, and he's gifting 10 ebooks. Thanks for that, Rob. Take it
Awesome.
away.
Thank you. Thanks, Edwin. I'm in San Francisco, so I'll say good morning, but hello, everybody. I'm glad you could make it here today. So I'm Rob Volpe. I'm an empathy activist. There's some contact information there for me. I've also got it up at the end of the slide, and I've got a couple of QR codes as well. So if you've got your phone handy, you can take advantage of that. I'm going to put this into presentation mode so I can walk you through. I'm also the founder and chairman of Ignite 360. And Ignite 360 is a marketing research and strategy firm. So we talk to people for a living. We find out how they think and feel, and then help our clients better understand what they can do about it. So similar to Slim, if you heard his presentation earlier about consulting, and I know there's a few others that are doing corporate consulting, I resonated all too well with that frustration. But when you're trying to help people overcome their judgment, their differences, and connect to empathy. And so what we do is go out and find out how people are thinking and feeling. And a lot of that led to my empathy work. I've been known to be an astute observer of life. You know, I'm happy to look at things from a different perspective. I live in San Francisco with my husband, Charles. There's my house, my husband, Charles, and our 3 cats, Domino, Barnabas, and Solitaire. And I'm also the author, as Edwin mentioned, of Tell Me More About That, Solving the Empathy Crisis One Conversation at a Time. And empathy is something that I've always been passionate about and naturally engaged with since I was a child. But the moment that really got me going as an adult and really set me on the path to speaking with you today is the study of studies, as I call it. They came out of the University of Michigan in 2010. with Sarah Conrath and her team, where they did a meta-analysis of university studies from 1979 to 2009 and found between 1979 and 2001, there was a 40% decline in the ability of students to have empathy with their peers. And then that number didn't change after that. It stayed at that lower level. And that was really worrying to me, but it was like this Cassandra moment. I was standing in an airport when I first saw this come up on CNN, and it went across the ticker and the anchors talked about it. And I was like, oh my God, we've got to do something about this, because in 2010, when the study came out, those college students were already into their early 30s. They were into their career. Things were happening for them. And that's not good. That means they're not going to be as productive. They're not going to be contributing, collaborating, communicating in the same ways. And even back then, we were starting to see what I think a lot of us would point to as the empathy crisis and the challenge that we have in our connection and communication with each other. That was already starting then. And yet there I was standing in the airport, and I looked around, and the guys over at the restaurant were having a beer and other people were racing to get their flight. And I felt like I was the only person that was looking at that. And I thought, this is not good. We need to do something. And so at Ignite 360, when I founded that company in 2011, we started to get curious to learn more about empathy. There wasn't a ton of social science that had been published at that point, but we started to look into what was available, what the neuroscientists were finding, and also exploring how our clients were responding when we were going out into the field. Because as Slim was mentioning, there was a lot of judgment that was going on. This is us on an in-home ethnography, and the gentleman there on the left is Frank, who's one of the characters, or he appears in the book, and the chapter mother would never do that. And our clients would have judgment. We'd go out, we'd spend time with wonderful people like Frank, and then at the end of the session, they would still have judgment. They wouldn't hear what was really going on. And we wanted to get beyond that. We wanted to help them better connect and understand, because otherwise, what was the point? So we started to look at what was getting in our clients' way, what was getting in our way. As I mentioned, we looked at the social sciences that was out there and started to figure out, consulting with a couple of psychologists, how we might be able to get beyond that. And so we continue to do our research for our clients. From the book, this is Iris. She appears in the chapter, The Birth of Venus. Notice the artwork that's on the wall in the background. And these are illustrations taken off of actual photos in the moment. And here is Amelia, who also appears in the book. And as we paused and reflected, we realized that what was actually happening, while people were talking back then, if you go back 10, 12 years ago, people were talking about, oh yeah, we need to be more empathetic, but nobody was telling you what to do. So we started to hone our work into, well, what is it that you need to do? So we had learned a lot about empathy and understanding some principles of empathy, what it was, what it wasn't, but how do you actually do it? And that's how we came up with the 5 steps to empathy. And the 5 steps, which is what the book is about, and I bring to life using the stories of my experiences with some of those individuals and many more. The 5 steps are the things that you need to do in the moment when you're having an interaction with somebody. It's the stuff that comes up. So the first one is dismantling judgment, and we've found in our own research that gets in most people's way. The second one is asking good questions. The third one is actively listening, and I always reference Edwin's empathy circles, and hopefully everybody will stay to participate in those, because you've got to be present, you've got to be really listening if you're going to hope to have empathy. The next step is integrate into understanding, and then using solution imagination, so putting everything to work. And as I set out to write the book, I actually started in 2016. I was the true origin story. I was giving a presentation to a university class, and I was telling the stories of Frank and Iris and Amelia and sharing some of the crazy things that were happening during those sessions. And I noticed that the students were just listening with rapt attention. And a little voice inside me said, this is what you need to be writing about. These are the stories that you need to tell. And so I took an approach, rather than writing a straightforward, didactic business book, I took an approach to write something that sat more in the self-help, but also business and personal growth section that just told stories. And it tells stories within all of these 5 steps and my own personal growth and experience experience, as well as the in the moment situations, because I wanted people to be engaged and entertained so that they could learn through that process and so that those stories would stick with them. Ultimately, what I want people to come away with is a dose of what Maya Angelou talks about here. And I always love citing her. I think we all have empathy. We may not have enough courage to display it. And what I want is for people to be inspired. I love when I hear from people the stories that have stuck with them, and then all of a sudden they are in a situation and they draw on it. They remember Amelia and that chapter and how that encouraged them to change their behavior, or the way I was reacting in my interview with Frank, which again is in the book. And it reminded them that, oh, wait, there is a choice to be made. I can do something different and try to get to a place of empathy. The response to the book, as Edwin mentioned, it won an award from the Independent Book Publishers Association as one of the best self-help books of 2022, which I'm incredibly proud of. And some of the reviews that I've heard from both reviewers and then also a reader, a regular reader, are up here. Compelling, moving, and at times laugh out loud funny. And again, as I said, that's what I want people to be moved. I want them to laugh and to be entertained. As the IBPA judge mentioned, was using storytelling. There's a lot of introspection. There's a lot of me in the book. And then, as one reader wrote and posted, this book has what every business book should: sex, drugs, guns, and a penis mirror. And seriously, this book will have you laughing out loud. So there's a QR code there.
1 minute.
Thank you. There's a QR code there that takes you to Amazon. The book is available in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. I narrated it myself. So you can check it out there. I'm also giving away 10 copies here. And if you are a Goodreads reader, I'm actually running a giveaway coincidentally right now for hardcover. So you can try your luck there with the thousands of people that have signed up over there. And then finally, I would love to continue the conversation. So there's different ways to reach me. As I mentioned earlier, the website, email, you can find me on socials, look for Empathy Activist. And I also have a newsletter that comes out twice a week. The most recent one is What's the Secret to New Year's Resolutions That Stick? And that QR code takes you to the Beehive page where you can sign up and check out the different newsletters. So Edwin and Anita, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Honored to be part of this group and to continue the conversation on empathy.
Thank you, Rob, and thanks for your presentation and your friendship and the connection we've had over the years. And so we'll move on. If you want to stop the screen share on that, there we go. And our next speaker is Nicole Price, and Nicole is an engineer turned empathy revolutionary. Yeah, we need more empathy revolutionaries. She is the author of Spark the Heart, Engineering Empathy in Your Organization, and she's gifting 3 books to the Empathy Summit participants. So take it away, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. I love that people know that I am an engineer. I think it's important because I'm not naturally empathetic. And the way that I found myself in this position was because I taught something else entirely. I used to talk with organizations about disengagement. And a former speaker mentioned that disengagement has been anywhere in the last 20 years, somewhere between 68% and upwards almost of 80%. But my focus was on this 32%. I, as an engineer, feel like we get more failure because we study failure. We study why people leave, why people quit, why they don't stay. And the work that I was doing was about, okay, what if we studied the people who were staying? What caused them to be engaged? What caused them to be or give discretionary effort? But at no point through that process did I center empathy until there was a gentleman who said to me, Nicole, I understand completely what you're saying to me, but I was hoping that you would help me get it emotionally. I get it intellectually, but I don't care. And I remember feeling like, did this dude just tell me he don't care about what I'm saying right now? And I wasn't all that excited, but I did think somebody needs to teach folks about empathy. And in no point did I think that somebody needed to be me. But what happened was, and what the book is about, is my own personal journey to recognizing that empathy is a crucial leadership skill. and that some of us being overly focused on logic and thinking that lacking the emotional component somehow made us more logical was a fallacy. And this book is purely a blueprint to help other people, teach people about empathy. It is in no way trying to get you to hire me as a consultant to engage my firm. What it is all of the research that I've done through story and the competency building to teach other people how to teach their direct reports empathy. Everyone can't rely on me, can't come to me, won't be able to find me. So what would it look like if people found empathy for themselves? And that's what this book is. But then I think this particular quote highlights for me what tends to happen to most people who were not naturally empathetic, who become empathetic. It's by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and these days we're talking a lot about plagiarism, and I think her entire body of work has been stained because people suggested that she was a plagiarist, but her work around change has been incredibly helpful to me. But the quote that's not even related to change management or death or any of the other things she talks about related to change basically says that beautiful people, and I like to change that to say empathetic people, don't just happen, that there's usually something, some defeat, some suffering, some kind of struggle that's caused them to be there. And for me, this picture highlights what happened in my life. So one day I was at work in a job I loved, working in leadership development, when I got a call that my mom, who's pictured here on the left, had been in an accident and that she didn't make it. And it was my sister who was calling me. My sister's a little bit of a exaggerator in some interesting ways. And so I thought she was exaggerating in this particular instance as well. And she wasn't. And I later learned, standing in the lobby of a trauma center, that my mom had been mowed over by a drunken driver who left her there for dead. And so, like many people who lose their parents, I was immediately taking care of affairs, but I was also in a murder trial that drug on for years because this gentleman, when he ran into my mom, had been drinking and driving. He had also stolen a car, and this was not his first offense. But the critical component that I think is important here was that after I'd taken off 5 weeks of work to just try to handle affairs and get myself back together, I was sitting in the office with my boss, whom I still think is a very considerate and kind person. And she said to me, Nicole, how are you doing? Asking all the token niceties that you're supposed to ask when you consider HR professionals and what we've been taught to do. But as soon as I finished telling her how I felt, her very next question was, okay, let's talk about your projects and where you were. And I think in that moment, I recognized for the first time what it feels like when empathy for your situation is just another checkbox on a list of things that leaders have to do. And I opened the chapter of the book basically saying that I might be the worst person to talk about empathy because it is not a natural skill for me. And it was my mother's empathetic demonstration that helped me to recognize that empathy is something that we can develop. And many people don't believe that. I know everyone probably on this call today does know that. Helping people to understand that there are lots of different types of empathy. This book is specifically stretching cognitive or mental empathy muscles. It's not necessarily teaching effective or emotional empathy to others, even though I think that is drastically important. And the third bullet point is addressing the thing that I hear the most, which is how do you hold people accountable if you're focusing on empathy? And in the blueprint, it's completely outlined how empathy and accountabilities are allies and not the antithesis of each other. And so I just want to double down again that what is available to you in the book is a blueprint for developing empathy in other people, especially people who are not naturally prone to be empathetic. And so in general, if you hear nothing else I say, is that I'm trying to get people to embrace this mindset that skill building for leaders is not just a nice to have, it's a must have. It is our jobs, it is our responsibilities as leaders, and the competencies related to empathy can be taught, and we know what it looks like when it's there. We know what it looks like when it's missing, and we have to build leaders' capacity to build empathy in others, because we can't overcorrect and lean on consultants such as myself. So I just want to leave everyone with this basic premise and idea that we can engineer empathy in organizations. And if you have any questions or would like to connect with me, all of my social media handles are at drnicoleprice.com. And I would love to answer any questions you might have. This year, we are doing quarterly masterclasses to help organizations learn how to take their performance to the top 1% of their industry by centering empathy and not making it an adjacent or nice to have. So thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope that if you read the book, if you listen to the first chapter, that you will give me a review because I value your opinion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So our next speaker is Ian Roberts, and Ian helps create Olympic-level empathy on teams, and he is the author of Radical Empathy, Equity-Focused Testimonials, Trials, and Tools for School Leaders, and he's gifting one book. So the floor is yours, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. Good morning, everybody. I am currently serving as the superintendent of the largest school system in the state of Iowa, the Des Moines Public Schools. And I struggled a little bit, Edwin and team, as to whether or not I should honor this obligation this morning in light of what we have been dealing with over the last 3 days or so. In a school district that is 20 minutes from mine, my colleague, Carl Wicks, who's the superintendent, they had the first deadly school shooting of the year at that school. And then even on this morning, within the last hour, having heard of some additional updates, certainly it's tugging at my heartstrings. But I think I would not have missed this opportunity to be in this space with like-minded individuals who have recognized for a very long time how important and impactful leading, living, and serving from an empathetic orientation is. You know, when I wrote the book, Radical Empathy, Equity-Focused Testimonials, Trials, and Tools for School Leaders, it is grounded in a couple of very, very simple tenets. The first is I recognize that while I had an opportunity to do a lot of reading, I was privy to sort of a plethora of research with regards to empathy and compassion, I started to really see and experience a disconnect between the theoretical aspects of empathy and how practitioners were showing up, truly living out those competencies and tenets of empathy in their daily lives. You know, it is said that school leaders make an average of about 500 decisions every single day that affect the lives of those teachers, students, and parents with whom they interact. But in this pre-K-12 profession, what is also very well known is the fact that we tend to make a lot of our decisions more from a technical orientation, right? You will often hear school leaders or educators talking about making data-driven decisions. And oftentimes those decisions are grounded in what is or what are the quantitative aspects of what we're doing. And that includes looking at assessments and test scores and student attendance and student absences. And so many school leaders and teachers and other educators have made decisions that does not necessarily consider humanizing the students and teachers and leaders with whom we are interacting. Case in point, today there are approximately 51.5 million students who are enrolled in pre-K-12 education in this country. And what is interesting about that number is most recently we have seen a pivot of students who were considered minority students who are Black and brown now becoming majority students, with about 55% of those students becoming the majority of students who are enrolled in our school systems. But what we have not seen with these pivots are sort of strategies, structures, and even policies. We're now beginning to see a little bit of those that truly considers the lived experiences of all of these students. One additional data point that really inspired sort of the writing of this book is our students who are considered LGBTQIA+. We've looked at information recently, that is within the last 5 years, of that 51.5 million or so students. And based on a survey that was administered to students across those districts in the United States, about 20% of our students identified as LGBTQIA+. And what was heart-wrenching and also served as an inspiration for this sort of writing of this radical empathy book was the fact that when we looked at it even further, it is said that close to, I believe, 25% of those students said that they've either considered or attempted suicide in the last 2 years. Why? Because school systems and schools were not as inclusive as they should be. Yes, empathy truly saves lives. I've posited in this book that I wanted to have a nice marriage or a merger between what is happening in the theoretical space around the plethora of research around empathy and how we can inspire practitioners to truly show up and ground and anchor their work in empathy the same way we have done with every single leadership principle that we have inculcated, loved, and have so much pride in sharing. And so I've spent the last 8 years interviewing a number of practitioners, school teachers, principals, and school district leaders, particularly those who have led with high results and high impact from an empathetic orientation. And I also juxtapose that by having conversations with a number of them who did not initially embrace empathy as a way to teach and lead towards success. I've also shared in this book my own journey, my personal journey, as someone who did not become sort of 100% empathy focused until I had a life-changing experience with how I've interacted with students, teachers, and some of my peers. And I have to say, while I get on stages and stand in front of school systems across the country, raising my right hand and saying with pride, my name is Ian Roberts, and I'm an empathetic leader, I haven't always been this way. One of the life-changing experiences that it took from me, and I've shared some of this in this book, is the fact that my decisions were grounded in outcomes and data that did not consider the qualitative or empathetic or humanizing impact on students, but mostly about the quantitative data, test scores, assessments. And as a result of those decisions, I have caused a number of students to either drop out of schools. And there's one instance where one of my favorite students is now serving life in prison. And that is because during the earlier part of my career, I did not understand or was unwilling to embrace leading from an empathetic orientation. The testimonials and trials in this book from principals, teachers, and other leaders continue to serve an inspiration even for me as I go back to read some of them and share them in my daily walk and daily orientation. The motivation for the book is certainly around my own experiences, but also recognizing very quickly that once I decided to pivot towards becoming an empathetic leader, the impact that I have had, not only on students with whom I've interacted, but on communities, on parents who had given up in the pre-K-12 public education system, and certainly on leaders, is measurable, and certainly one that I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of. What I'm hoping that you, my esteemed colleagues, and fellow empathy revolutionaries will take away from my brief sharing on this morning are 3 things. 1, it's important for us to create these spaces, because while I woke up this morning and have struggled over the last several days with whether or not I should show up here because of what I've been addressing and dealing with as I lead a school system of 31,000 students, believing that I'm coming into a space this morning with a group of individuals who will receive and accept, and without saying a word, create a space that is safe for me, has been encouraging. The second is, I believe it's important that we take this, Edwin and team, this space in a very revolutionary, and I would venture to say radical way across the country. So we can certainly enlist millions and millions of people to recognize and understand the power of teaching, leading, and serving from an empathetic orientation. And the third takeaway that I want you, my esteemed colleagues, to leave with is certainly anchored in a little bit of a bias, and that is, in our pre-K-12 education system, we all posit that this is the place that really prepares future generations. We have to make sure that we are inundating our public and private school systems with how important empathy is to change the lives of all.
Thank you so much, Ian, for that moving presentation. And I would like to say that in terms of practical approaches, I think the empathy circle that we're going to be doing at the end of the summit today is one of the best practices I know of for empathy, teaching empathy, or actually practicing it, not just theoretically, but an experience. And our goal, our vision here at the Empathy Center, which you see behind me, is to teach every student in the country, in the world, how to do that practice. And I think it could be a real contribution to raising the level of empathy in schools and in society. So next, I'm going to pass it up.
Just one second, Edwin. Edwin, just because Ian might not stay for the duration, given everything that he's got on his plate right now, Ian, I would just invite you to look through the chat, because you've inspired a lot of moving testimonials from your peers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anita. Thank you.
And I'll pass it over to Anita, who's going to facilitate or host the next hour.
Wow, I'm so excited. I'm so moved. I'm so touched. Maria, I'm so excited to introduce Maria, who is an empathy advocate who shows progressive, people-centric organizations and leaders how to achieve radical success through empathy. She's a sought-after speaker and facilitator and the author of The Empathy Edge, Harnessing the Value of Compassion as an Engine for Success. She's gifting 50 audiobooks to the summit. Welcome, and over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Anita. Can everyone see my slides? Yes? Okay, great. I'm going to start my little slideshow here. I won't be able to see you while my slideshow is playing, but thank you for that great introduction. As Anita mentioned, I am an author, a speaker, a leadership trainer, and really what I like to call myself an empathy advocate. I'm the founder of Red Slice, which I've spent decades helping forward-thinking leaders and brands embrace empathy for radical success. And that's really how I came at this work, was through marketing and branding and having an understanding of the importance of connecting and engaging with people on a human level and trying to teach my clients that as well. My next book actually is coming out this fall, The Empathy Dilemma, which is about how to help successful leaders balance performance, people, and personal boundaries. And side note, I want to include all of your books in the reading list in the back of that book. We're still in the copy edit right now, so I will be reaching out to make sure that we get your book included in there. Pretty much the mantra that sums up how I come at this work is that cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the both and philosophy that I'm trying to push forth into the world, that for too long we've subscribed to these either or false narratives that have held us back from an organizational perspective, but also from a human perspective and from an innovation perspective. Let me tell you why I wrote this book. Some people go, how does a brand strategist end up becoming an empathy advocate? There's a variety of reasons. One, as I mentioned, is that, in my work, I really discovered the superpower of empathy and understanding what makes people tick, where they're coming from, their context. And that can be used for good or that could be used for evil. And I really encourage my clients to use that for good, for how can you improve lives? How can you add value? How can you speak the language of the person that you're talking to? And realizing what a vital skill that is when we're dealing with colleagues, when we're dealing with our children, when we're dealing with our partners. But the biggest reason I wrote the book is this guy right here. This was taken several years ago. My son is 9 years old now, but about 2016, when I was having these epiphanies about wanting to do a little bit more meaningful work and seeing and unlocking the secret of empathy in terms of engaging and connecting with people. My son was 2.5 at the time, and I was reading him books about compassion and sharing and empathy. But when I looked up at the headlines, right, politically, organizationally, in business, in media, the examples of the leaders and their behaviors that I saw, quite frankly, frightened me for my son. And I thought, what is the point of teaching him all this if this is the world he's going into, if these are his role models? And being the stubborn redheaded Italian that I am, I couldn't let that stand. So I decided to approach it from a research perspective and say there had to be leaders, organizations, brands who were practicing empathy and winning. And I was delighted to find tons of research, data, case studies, interviewed several people, and spent 3 years really digging into the research and the case studies and the data, and built a business case for why empathy is not just good for society, it's actually great for business. Now, when we look at the world, Rob mentioned this in the studies that he cited. I talk about it in the studies that I cite in the book. There's so many disconnections in our world. There's so many places where we have conflict now more than ever, right? But there's racism, misogyny, war, bias, prejudice. That's at a macro level. But then when we look at our everyday level, especially those of us in organizations, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, there's dysfunctional work teams, there's communication misunderstandings, there's late projects, there's angry customers. All of these issues that we face on a macro and a micro level, I believe the root of that is a lack of empathy. And that unwillingness to see things from another person's point of view costs us dearly because we remain paralyzed, we repeat the same mistakes, and we don't connect and engage. Ultimately, we degrade our brand reputation, our team's productivity, our client or customer experience, as was mentioned earlier, and our organization's bottom line performance. You've heard many statistics today about the cost of disengagement, the cost of a lack of productivity. So my whole work and the point of this book and the point of my next book is that both and thinking is what our world requires right now. We, again, have to get rid of this false narrative that we can only be empathetic or ambitious, compassionate or competitive, empathetic or high performing. We are smart enough and bold enough to embrace both of those things to be true at the same time. And I have a picture of a smoothie here because this is my new favorite breakfast smoothie. And it is nutritious and delicious. It is really good for you. It has everything you need to start your day off right. It's got your good fats, your carbohydrates, your proteins, and it's delicious. My 9-year-old asks me to make this for him as a treat. So we can embrace both and thinking. Balancing organizational performance and creating a thriving workplace culture that humanizes people, doesn't require them to leave their humanity at the door, is entirely possible. And really, the pandemic just accelerated that trend. It was already a movement that was swelling and starting. Many of you have been at the forefront of that. So with the book, The Empathy Edge, the structure and the takeaways, first of all, I want people to take away that empathy is a strategic leadership, culture, and brand advantage. It is something worth paying attention to. It is something that has bottom line impact. And that empathy is not just good for society, it's great for business. Now, some people, I did a TEDx talk about tricking leaders into being more empathetic, and some people took umbrage with that. How can you make empathy this self-serving thing? My philosophy is that once you embrace empathy for whatever reason, you're there. You're in the room with people. You are seeing things from another person's point of view, and that transforms you from the outside in. So if I'm trying to be empathetic to the skeptics out there by trying to meet them where they are and saying, come along with me, come try this out, come look at the world through this perspective and engage with people in this way and see how it transforms your life. So the book is divided sort of into 3 sections. There's a basic intro about what is empathy, some of the research, some of the scientific experiments that have been done around empathy, proving that for barring some outlying psychological disorders, empathy is innate to us as humans, and it is a muscle. And for some of us, unfortunately, it atrophies based on our environment or based on whether it's not modeled or rewarded or it's not safe to show, but it can be strengthened and it can be learned through active choice. So the book is divided into 3 sections. 1, we really need to start empathy at an individual level. What do we do as individuals and as leaders to strengthen our own empathy? Then 2, what is the brand or what is the team or the culture around those people in an organization? What are the processes, the policies, the reward structures, the hiring procedures that enable those people's empathy to thrive? And then finally, you can look at things from a market perspective, from a brand and customer experience perspective, because now it's genuine. It's starting from the inside out. So what is the experience you're bringing to your customers? What is it like to do business with you? What is it like to interact with you? If you're a nonprofit, what is it like to be part of your community or be a donor? That experience can then translate from the inside out. And I also define empathy at work in my book and in my work as such: being willing and able to see, understand, and where appropriate, feel another person's perspective, and further use that information to act compassionately. Compassion is empathy in action. We can be empathetic all we want, but if we don't do anything with the information we're getting from other people, and that doing doesn't have to be whatever they want. It doesn't have to be making a different decision. It can just be holding space. It could be listening. It could be doing an empathy circle. So there's different actions we can take and ways that we can respond that are much more productive and much more healthy to connecting and engaging. So real quick, I'm going to speed through this because I got carried away on my little soapbox here, but I want to offer you this quote and a little freebie. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, states that, people will try to convince you to keep empathy out of your career. Your humanity will be tested. Don't accept this false premise. And I live by this. Again, both and, not either or. So if you would like to strengthen your own empathy, here's a QR code for you. Just grab your phone. It'll ask you a few questions about today's very short presentation. Enter the code habits and you'll get some tips from the book about how to daily or in different interactions strengthen your own empathy. And for those of you that want to keep in touch, please do. I have a newsletter. I have a great podcast featuring many of the folks that are on this call and hopefully
Maria.
more. Thank you so much, everyone.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sorry, I know those 10 minutes really fly by. Appreciate it. We just want to honor everybody who else is presenting today. And I have the honor to welcome Dr. Judith Orloff, who is an American board certified psychiatrist who specializes in treating highly sensitive people in her practice. She is a New York Times bestselling author whose most recent book is The Genius of Empathy: Practical Skills to Heal Your Sensitive Self, Your Relationships, and the World. Welcome, Judith. Over to you.
Hello, Anita. So good to see you. And thank all the speakers for your wonderful talks. I've just heard a couple of them with so much intelligence and enthusiasm. And I'm thrilled to debut my new book, which is coming out April 9th, but it can be pre-ordered. It's called on Amazon and any bookstore online, The Genius of Empathy. The Genius of Empathy. Yay, I see people clapping. I feel the same way. It's so exciting to have a book come out. And I wrote this book because I believe that empathy will save the world. I believe it is the one quality that we need that could save the world, and that it would behoove all of us to develop it and begin to show it in large and small ways everywhere we can. I'm presenting empathy as a healing tool. It's not the familiar definition of empathy as most people understand it, because I look at empathy as an energy. And when you activate that energy of empathy in yourself, let's say for self-empathy, which is one of the chapters, it activates the heart. and the heart is the healing energy. And so by activating the healing energy, you begin to benefit in your life, and you could begin to show that kind of healing to other people in terms of how you listen, in terms of how you are with them. And I just want to emphasize that in this book, I stress you don't have to like somebody to be empathic with them. You know, it's not a matter of their personality level. You just have to find the level that you can empathize with their suffering or their lackings. Or, you know, there's a chapter on narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. Now, why in the world would you ever want to have empathy for these people? You know, that's the linear mind. But in the book, I talk about how the linear mind is not always the answer to empathy, is that we have to get to a deeper place where we want to free ourselves from these attachments to anything negative that's going to bring us down and will keep us from being in our heart. So you can have empathy for, let's say, the suffering behind a narcissist's heinous acts, but you never forgive the act itself. So it's a distinction that I'm making that is really important. And I present empathy, you know, in this book as something that is a grace. It's not something that you just assume you have. It's something you have to want. And if you want it and you're attracted to it and you want to try it, even though you're hurting, even though you're lost, even though you think it won't work, there are a million good reasons why not to show empathy in this world. Even so, if there's something, a little part in you that's going, I need this at least for myself. I need to have self-empathy. I need to show myself some compassion. I've been through so much. Even if that's where you start, which is a great place to start, you know, you want to do it. But if you don't want to do it, don't do it. I mean, I assume everyone here wants to do it because they're all empathy experts. But if people don't want to do it, like in my practice, I specialize in treating sensitive people and empaths, and so they want to do it. But if somebody comes in who's very linearly minded, I think it's soft to have empathy. No, I don't want to do it. Then I work around that. You know, it's not something you ever force on somebody or say, no, you really need to do. It doesn't work that way. So it's a beautiful healing gift, empathy, and some of the chapters include. The first chapter, the first part of the book is healing yourself, soothing your nervous system. Something we need to do is soothe our nervous systems in this day and time. And I talk about the healing, igniting the healing power of empathy. How do you do that? Cultivating self-empathy is a chapter. Removing obstacles is a chapter, which means healing your emotional triggers, traumas, and fears. And then the part 2 is healing your relationships, which is very important because relationships are very tricky. And if you want love in your life and you want to have these kind of intimate relationships, you have to learn how to work with empathy and not just be reactive. And so I talk about in one chapter, the high art of empathic listening. And I consider it a high art. How do you listen to somebody? And I go through, you know, how to have your eye contact, how to have your heart, how to have your posture, how much do you talk? You know, all these things that, you know, it's a training. This book is an empathy training and what to do in certain situations. And then I have a chapter on practicing empathy with family, friends, and coworkers, even if you don't like them, which, you know, is a wonderful skill. You know, we're so taken by, you know, our personal likes and dislikes, which really empathy is something that expands beyond that. And I want to say, I feel honored. I hope I leave this out, and I shouldn't leave this out because it's a great honor, that the Dalai Lama wrote the foreword to this book. And for me, you know, he's been my hero, and he's someone, thank you, Anita, who I aspire towards. And the fact that it took months to get his endorsement, you know, it was a long process, that he trusted my work enough to write a foreword to it. It's kind of a blessing that I'll never forget. It's a real high point for me. And so it's kind of hard for me to share because it's so important to me. No matter what happens with the book, you know, one person reads it, a million people reads it, you know, this It's what is important to me. Anyways, so, that's how much I care about this whole thing. Okay, chapter 7 is healthy giving, caring without being a martyr, overhelping, or burning out. So I have a chapter on how to give in a healthy way so you're not burnout. Being an empath or showing healthy empathy doesn't mean you help everyone that you meet who needs help. It doesn't mean that. That I would be dead if I did that, with all the people who need help, because all the sensitive people, all of you probably experience this, all these great speakers, that people come to you and ask for help all the time. Strangers come to you. I wear an invisible sign that says, please help me. So you have to be able to say no to that and set boundaries. So a big theme, at times, it depends on how you are. You as the sensitive receptor have to keep honoring where you're at, where your energy is at, where, how much can you help today? Or do you need to just help yourself? Or do you need to just help no one? Do you need to veg out? You have to decide all of that. So this book, The Genius of Empathy, is about the inquiry into all these wonderful, to me, as a psychiatrist and empath, they're extremely wonderful topics. And they only lead to our elevation of the heart and to help the world be a better place when we begin to work on ourselves, our friendships, our love relationships. And then there's a chapter on what is empathy deficient disorder, which is about narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. And how do we deal with these people who have empathy deficient disorder? We need a skill set. We need an instruction manual. So I did my best to go through that and give people all the pointers, what to look for. And if you keep being attracted to these people, how to wake yourself up to that and how to treat them. And then finally, healing the world, empathic leadership, the grace of forgiveness, you matter to me, and the power of we. And that's it. We can do it. We need to do this together. This isn't about just me or you. William James wrote, "We are like islands in the sea, separate on the surface, but connected in the deep. We could find a better way with empathy. We have the potential to create an exciting and hopeful future." So that's the ending of the book. Thank you for letting me share my book. It's exciting. Nice to meet all of you. Nice to see your shining face, Anita. So,
Judith, congratulations on the book and the foreword by His Holiness. I'm so excited. We're tipping into 50 people gathered around the concept of empathy. It's very exciting. It's my pleasure to introduce Tina Kuhn, who is the CEO of the Lanzer Group, an organization that seeks to empower owners to grow their businesses. Tina has expertise in organizational transformation, spanning the cybersecurity, defense, intelligence, and government and commercial industries. She is the author of The E-Suite, Empathetic Leadership for the Next Generation of Executives. She is gifting also 20 audiobooks to the Empathy Summit. Welcome, Tina.
Hi, thank you, Anita, and thank you for all the great authors. This was an amazing group of people here. So I wrote this book because of my real life execution of empathy as a CEO. So a couple of years ago, I was brought into this mid-tier cyber security organization, and I was brought in to make significant change people, process, tools, the organization structure, everything. And you guys know change creates a lot of angst among people. Including leadership that has to go through the change. So I had this vice president that had also been brought in to help change. And we had very different styles. And we just butted heads a lot. And it took us a lot of time to kind of work out just working together. And as we started working through this, we started talking about empathy because we were using empathy tools to understand each other. So our talks started to get not just how we were going to work together, but how we could bring empathy into the larger organization and help this transformation and help this, the whole team and all the employees make all of these changes and be good with it. So we did that. The transformation went very well. And what we found is that empathy had a real positive impact, a real return on investment. It was amazing, actually. And as I think it was Natalie who talked about the ROI, empathy, in my opinion, is a hard leadership skill. It's not a soft skill. It is one that is necessary, and you can, I think leaders that have empathy bring in more money to their organization. So before I go into my book, I just wanted to read a couple survey and polls because there's such a difference between leaders and employees. So this was a poll on CEOs. This was 82% of CEOs said that their company's financial performance was tied to empathy. Isn't that amazing that empathy is now being recognized by CEOs? Now, I think there's a gap between their actions and what they are thinking. So that was another motivation of me writing this book, is to help leaders work through how to really apply empathy in their organization. So why do CEOs think this? They think because it increases trust, it increases productivity, motivation, well-being, and it decreases attrition. So there was another survey, and I can send out the who did the surveys. 900 employees were surveyed and said if they had an empathetic boss, they would be more motivated, more creative, and more likely to want to stay with the employer. I mean, these are like big positives for empathy, right? Like hard positives for empathy. So another one, 61% of employees felt more innovative compared to only 13% of those without an empathetic leader. Wow. I mean, you want your employees to be innovative, to look at new ways of doing things, to solve problems. So being empathetic will bring that. That's a real return on your investment. And then finally, 72% of employees are willing to work longer hours for an empathetic employer. Crazy, why you have empathy in your organization? Why wouldn't every leader learn how to be empathetic and how to apply empathetic techniques throughout their whole organization? So as I went through this process myself, and it, it was a process, and I didn't do everything right, but I feel like I really grew a lot during that year, that I was really focusing on this transformation and empathy and how to change myself to inspire others in the organization to also be empathetic and have it flow through the organization. So my book, I actually wrote it. Have a co-author, and it was this vice president that I worked with this transformation. We learned so much about empathy and how to work together that we ended up writing this book together. So the book goes through kind of different personality styles in business, different management styles, and how you can work with each other. I really like some of the guides that we have in the book. We have one that's a confrontation guide. How do you confront someone with empathy. You know, how it takes, you have to actually plan your confrontation. You don't want to do it with anger. So I'll just take a little aside. Just for everyone to think about, anger is a secondary emotion. The primary emotion that causes anger is fear. So I would like for everyone on the call to think about the last time they got angry and figure out what the fear is behind it. And you see that in leadership a lot when they're getting angry, but their anger is really their fear that they're going to look bad, fear that they're going to lose some income, fear that their boss is going to be angry or their customer is going to be not happy with them. So I think everyone should look at where your anger is, because then that traces back to what your fear is. And then fear you can work on.
1 minute.
So, okay. So the book has 3 parts. It has, in each part, it has vignettes, little stories that are easy to understand, scenarios on how to apply empathy in all these different types of situations. So the first part is organization strength and high-performing teams, how to create them. The second part is managing and leading organizational transformations, and that's where the confrontation guide is there. And then part 3 is around hiring, marketing, and sales with empathy. So thank you so much. I am just excited to be a part of this summit, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of the authors. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tina. It's now my pleasure to introduce Amy Wilson, who is a trusted transformation facilitator, redesigner for justice, and keynote speaker. She's passionate about co-creating the future of work and has also created a Healing for Work guide. Amy is the author of Empathy for Change: How to Create a More Understanding World. Welcome, Amy.
Hey, Dr. Nowak. And so many people, I'm just like so excited to be here and to be sharing the stage with so many amazing humans. So I appreciate being here and talking about the work that I've been doing. So what I've noticed is that a new world is emerging, that a world that is open and collaborative, participatory and peer-driven. And a lot of this work is made by many different hands, and it's also centered on equity. But we're also experiencing some serious denial and resistance to change from those who have power, because that involves a little bit of letting go of the past and giving over to this future system that we're designing. It involves giving up one's power, some control, and resources for this new pattern that is emerging. And this is something I know firsthand because 5 years ago, I left the space, but I co-created a shared language for public sector innovation and a movement called the Better Government Movement. And that was all that part about the movement was built during the Trump administration. And at the time I was standing up a center of excellence, working to help evolve government agencies into the 21st century. And during that time, I heard this phrase, and it said, "You work for me and you work for this president." So these are the last words that a White House official said to me before he ordered innovation.gov, the website that we had been co-creating, been taken down, and the Better Government Movement to cease operations, a movement of 5,000 people. So that was nearly 5 years ago. So since then, I've really licked my wounds and I've healed. And part of this healing process involved my writing this book, which I see as a creative reaction to the ego, the resistance, and the destruction that existed, and is the pushback that's happening. And during my recovery, I researched and I spoke to lots of different people and organizations who are designing this new world to help them uncover what made them successful, like what also, while also exploring my own story of this movement, why it resonated with so many, and what is happening in the world that is shutting this narrative of empathy down, empathy and compassion. And also have to do the shout out to Dr. Orloff. I'm an empath, a highly sensitive person, and empathy is my biggest strength. And so a little bit of a spoiler alert, but I started tapping into that wisdom that's within. And what I've also recognized is, and through this work is to go within, but also I published 3 years ago, Empathy for Change, How to Create a More Understanding World. I have the book right here. And I give readers language and frameworks to help evolve themselves as individuals, but then their organizations in this emerging world. So I think of it as a guidebook for anybody who understands the resistance that we're experiencing and who wants to change the dialogue and reimagine the better way forward. And one thing I know is true, like since the pandemic, we all feel this viscerally. I think many people on the call would feel this, is that many organizations and people want a culture steeped in well-being, with empathy, with community, but they don't know where to start. And so what I define in my book is that if empathy is feeling with someone instead of for them, we also must design a world with each other and not for them. So it requires us to share power, allow others to be actors in their life, and instead of being reactors, reacting to what's around them. And so at the end of my book, there's an empathy and action framework, which provides a roadmap for you to co-design what this culture might be within an organization to build, at the end of the day, a movement of change, not mandated from the top. What I've done since then, since the 3 years, almost 3 years to the day, I published my book. I've been working and co-creating cultures and systems built on empathy and innovation. Kind of think of that as a Venn diagram. And so at the center of this Venn diagram is personal and organizational transformation, and also context, so that we can understand where we need to go and where we are right now. So there's some things that I know are really true in this world, is that a modern workplace, like many of you have already said and talked about, and the people within these workplaces do these 3 things really well, which requires empathy at the end of the day. Number 1, they understand challenges. They understand the challenges that are existing in the world, in their organization, and they commit to meeting the needs of employees and customers out there. Number 2, you get to design and lead without ego. So they develop and co-create products, programs, and services that meet customer needs, but also employee needs. And then the third piece is delivering excellence. So that means top-notch and equitable services, programs, and products out there in the world. So the work that I do allows us to bring in all of these things are at the end of the day with the workplace, but it allows us to bring empathy into the equation and efficiency there, right? With all the data that we've been sharing, I don't need to share all that extra data on top of that. But at the end of the day, when I think about this world that I'm building, and what I hope that you take away from the book, is no matter where you are, that you can change. And by evolving yourself and changing, the world around you has already changed. And it really does start with us. And when you build that empathy and compassion within yourself, it does ripple outward. And we build better relationships. We ultimately, over time, shift the system. And the system that I hope will be able to seed power and work towards that equitable future that is emerging. So where I'm at now is 3 years after my book was published. I've added more clarity to my mission, which is to help coach people to overcome burnout, which is, based on my research and experience, is the main thing that is blocking us from having empathy for each other. When we're in burnout, we put our blinders on and do not see the people around us and are more selfish. So I created Healing for Work related to this. So, and it helps you see yourself and see the system more clearly. And then also I've evolved and created the Empathy Action Lab, which is a space where ambitious, purpose-driven change leaders and organizations can build community, or even design a movement if that's also what you want to do. So through my co-design process, I really build clarity and definition to the work. And so I support you. Got it. Support you and also help you, coach you through what, through this new world of co-creating instead of always knowing the answer. It's a lot of ambiguity in that with too. So, those are the things that I've landed on 3 years after the book is launched. And, I feel like there's another book in me somewhere along the line. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and my book, and I hope you get to engage with me more. I'll put my contact information in the chat if anybody wants to talk more and get copies of my books. I think I emailed someone about it yesterday, but I don't know if it got through. So yeah, looking forward to engaging with all of you. And thank you for having me, Anita and Edwin.
Thank you so much, Amy. You've got a couple of comments in the chat box from people who have read your book saying how great it is. So savor that. It is now my pleasure to welcome Indy Young, who is a thought leader in product strategy and a data scientist who listens. I love that frame. She's also a founding partner of Adaptive Path, a consultancy that uses design to empower companies to create meaningful experiences with their products and services. She is the author of Practical Empathy for Collaboration and Creativity in Your Work, and she is gifting 4 ebooks to the Empathy Summit. Welcome, and over to you, Indy.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita. This is actually the book that I want to talk about, which has come out since Practical Empathy. And I want to thank also Amy for that big shot of optimism. It's so easy to get depressed about what has happened, especially in the past year in our field. It seems like there are people who have that ego and that resistance that she's talking about. They destroy things. And they seem to be run a little bit by greed, but I don't think that that's entirely the whole story. I think that there's a lot of people out there who are run by curiosity and wanting to solve problems and this noble idea of making the world better. In fact, I like to call some of them the tech nobles, right? Because that's kind of how it's coming out class-wise. And so one of the things that happens, though, is that curiosity gets run into the wrong path. There is this sort of tendency, not only in the media or in our entertainment, but also in like economics or some of the other areas that like to do research. Economics is really famous for it. They'll do something like, look at all the people who are here attending this live. Maybe look at all the people who later then listen to the recording. And they'll say, wow, what are the attributes of these people? Well, we're going to count how many people look like they're women. Let's do it gender-wise. How many are women or how many are men? And I'm like, oh my God, why, you intelligent economics person or whoever who's doing this research, why are you going down that path? That path is demographic assumptions. Not only are you using a binary gender, which is ridiculous these days, you should be using a much bigger variety or spectrum. But what does it matter? So my book, both Practical Empathy and this new book, Time to Listen, is about helping people shift away from those demographic assumptions and look at something that's more important, something that can help us create excellent services and products, and something that helps us feed that curiosity that's a little bit deeper. So that's the reason why I wrote the book. I want teams to have the power to get off of that demographic assumptions path. It's curiosity. Let's fire that curiosity in a different direction. Let's feed it with more information that will actually make a difference. So one of the things is that I want this understanding, deep understanding of other people, which is empathy. We know it's cognitive empathy. I want it to scale. I want it to scale so that we can use it reliably within businesses and run metrics against it. If I'm going to do something that is at scale, I'm going to share my screen briefly here. I need a method. So I have created a method with a lot of different stops along it that can be shifted and changed, and little tiny spots on it can be inherited within various organizations depending on what they are up against within their own sort of methods. The other thing that I need is a frame. This is not about people's personalities. We can't know a person completely because the person's in so many different contexts. So the thing that I do is I make sure that I understand people according to their particular purpose. So it's just a specific purpose that a person is addressing that I want to understand their interior cognition about. Within this purpose, I can find patterns across people at scale. If we were looking outside this purpose, there's way too many contexts. What I have on the screen is one of the examples, and I've put this on my LinkedIn posts a lot. You can find it there. We're about to do a little comic strip for it. And the purpose in that comic, this little illustration here, is that it's a person who's taking care of their parent who has a temporary inability to get around. So there's going to be 2-3 months worth, maybe more, of taking care of that parent. So inside the book, what I help people learn is how to find interior cognition, how to listen for interior cognition. And one of the most important things, well, the first most important thing is the idea that we're doing it within that frame. Like, we're only going to talk to people what went through your mind as you were taking care of a person. Notice the person's purpose, or taking care of your parent. Notice the person's purpose is not about the solution. It's not about a product. It's not about a service. The second thing that's really important here, and there's a lot of, it's fairly complex, so people take a little while to get used to it. But the second thing is that we can't find out someone's interior cognition sort of like as a personality. What we're doing is looking at it within that frame, and within that frame, they bring up a lot of topics. So what I like to do is I like to say, hey, each topic is a different candy, like a little candy, layered candy, like a jawbreaker that they put on the table as they're talking about something. Here, the purpose was decide whether to go out to a restaurant in the early pandemic. And there's, grocery delivery as a topic. There's signage within the grocery store or within the restaurant. There's wait until next year. All these different topics come up. And what's interesting is that within each topic, there are many layers. And oftentimes we're used to talking about description layer, which is just the explanation, what happened, how it happened, all the statements of fact around it, what was the sign. And we need that for scene setting. Most research goes down into the expression layer. The expression layer is a person's preferences, their opinions, their attitudes, their beliefs about usually the product. That's market research, POBA. What I want to get to is that center, that core. I want to get past the generalized cognition and get into the interior cognition, very specific thoughts running through a person's mind in the past, their inner thinking, their emotional reactions, and their guiding principles. Guiding principles are personal rules that they use to make decisions. And so these are the things that I am after in a listening session. A listening session is something that I do with people without an end. It is an exploration of a territory. You can think of it like a landscape and you're following somebody hiking around. You then can do this with enough people with the same purpose to find patterns. And one of the things that I do with the patterns is I create something that looks a little bit like a city skyline. And this is where it's scaling and where we can get our metrics. What we do, the city skyline up here at the top, is everything that we heard from interior cognition. Everything below those different towers in the skyline are the things that an organization's solution does in support.
1 minute.
Support, delivering access. And what we can do then is measure how well each of those things in support in the foundation actually help or harm a person. I talk about different levels of harm. And here you can see some metrics here in terms of some harm for a certain thinking style. So that's where I go with the data that I create. Because what we're doing here is we're using cognitive empathy to guide where we're going to look at doing better support for people. So I love that Amy had all that positive optimism. I want this to happen so badly. I've been working at it so hard. I might need some coaching from her. This is Burnout City. But what I offer is courses. So you can go to my website, indieyoung.com. I also have a book, but the courses get into the data analysis as well and the thinking styles. So I want to thank you, Dr. Nowak, and I want to thank you, Edwin.
Thank you so much, Indy, and gorgeous slides. Gotta say, those are really great illustrations. It is now my pleasure to introduce Michael Ventura, who is an entrepreneur, advisor, speaker, and thought leader whose work on the topic of empathy has been embraced by Fortune 500 companies, including Google, Goldman Sachs, IBM, Microsoft, and Nike, as well as academic institutions like Princeton and West Point, and the public sector through his work with the Obama administration and the UN. He is the author of Applied Empathy, The New Language of Leadership. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Anita. It's great to be here with all of you, and what a pleasure to just share some time with such wonderful colleagues and people who care about this topic. I'd like to begin maybe by just saying that the world has been a particularly complex place in the last few months, maybe more so for others than it has been in a while, and this is a good time to be talking about empathy. And so I know there's been a lot of listening in the sessions this morning. I'd like to invite you, if you're willing, to kind of shift into a little bit more of a cognitive space, which is a great segue from the last conversation. And I'd like to ask you a question. And feel free to use the chat. You can also just keep this private and to yourself. But I'd like to ask you to think about someone you presently want to understand better. That might be someone you actually know. That might be someone or a group of people that you're having a hard time understanding. Politics domestically and abroad are very ripe for that question. So take a moment and think about who that person might be. And I'd like you to kind of hold them in your head as we go through this a bit. I'd like you to also think about what seems to be preventing you from having an accurate understanding of them today. What stands in the way of that? Asking that sort of question under that, where does that come from? What could you try to do to understand them better? What behavior change within yourself might open up a space for greater understanding? And in effect, this sort of active exploration is what was the inspiration for me to develop the methods I've documented in Applied Empathy. As Anita said, my name is Michael Ventura. I've been an entrepreneur, author, and educator for over 20 years. And my career started as an entrepreneur building an agency, which became a consultancy in New York City called Sub Rosa. And Sub Rosa, in our early days, was an organization that got called in to help organizations in moments of transformation and change. Sometimes those were positive. We've raised some capital. We're growing fast. Sometimes they were problematic or traumatic. We've had a scandal. We've had an executive leave. We've had bad culture for years. We've never been able to address it. And so our work kind of sat in between internal culture change and organizational design and external brand and communications. And the reason why that work sat in the middle is because ultimately people want the brand and the business to be known for something out in the world. But if it's not true internally, it will never hold water externally. Like the quick anecdote I've had years ago was a client told us, we want to be known as the most innovative player in our category. And so our first question was, well, are you? And they said, oh, no, we're far from it, but we want everyone to think that. And I said, well, that's probably the wrong place to start. Let's go back a little bit and think about how we can make you a more innovative culture that gets it a little more embedded into the organization as it is today. And then people will start to believe it over time. But that's sort of the tendency with marketing and communications folks, is to sort of put on blast what they hope they'll be and hope the organization catches up. And so finding the way to dance between those internal and external constituent groups is really a valuable part of this work. And so how did applied empathy come to be? Well, when we were sitting in our office and talking with my colleagues about briefs that would come in the door, I noticed, began to build a tendency for shutting the doors and saying, we have the right answer. And we weren't doing enough getting out of the room, getting out of the building, going, talking to people. And when we went and did that, our work was always made better. And so what I realized was this was a skill that wasn't uniformly embodied in everyone on our team. And so we needed to create a practice for ourselves to skill up new hires, to skill up existing people in our organization so that they could go do this better. And so that was how applied empathy was born. It was really in order to train our own team. And in order to do that and do that well, we thought an academic partner would be helpful, a place where we could field test some of this, where we could actually learn in an academic environment. And so we partnered with Princeton, and we taught 3 semesters at Princeton University that became the foundation of what applied empathy's methods are sort of grounded in. And during the course of those 3 semesters, the work was going well, our work with clients was improving, all of that stuff was happening nicely. And then we got a phone call from the United States Military Academy at West Point. And they said, we like what you're doing at Princeton, and we'd like to see if it also works for soldiers in the military. And so this was a perfect test for us to see if we could take what worked at an academic institution like Princeton and translate it to a very different academic environment at West Point. And the headline was, it worked. It worked exactly the same way. We didn't change any of the material, and we realized we were onto something. And that's what led us to writing the book and putting it out into the world. And it was really primarily written for leaders. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Leaders do well with objectives and tasks, with skills development, with quantifiable goals. And all types of empathy don't necessarily lend themselves to that sort of behavior, but cognitive empathy does. And a series of mindsets and behavior changes and tactics that can help someone limber up their empathy muscles and make them more deft and capable. That was really the goal of this work. It was give someone a playbook to start to get more comfortable in that cognitive empathy space as a leader, as a collaborator. And when they do, their ability to connect with each other, to understand their consumers, to understand the competition or the competitive landscape, to understand their board or their shareholders better, increases across the board. And it's not just for companies that are, potentially more enlightened cultures. I've done this with big 5 banks. I've done this with very bureaucratic institutions. And this is a teachable skill that everyone gets benefits from. And so the book is really designed to help offer those lessons and those tools in a toolkit approach, not necessarily a linear approach. Everything in that book will not work for you personally, but pieces of it will. And those ones that do, you can embody and you can practice and you can move with over time and let them become part of your own toolkit. I know we're sort of in these little 10-minute windows jamming a lot in, but I'd like you to go back to that audience that you were thinking about earlier, that person or that group of people that you'd like to understand better. And I'd like you to think about, is there a question, if you just had one singular question you could ask that person to try to understand them better, what would it be? I'm going to give you maybe 20, 30 seconds. If anyone would like to share that question in the chat, please feel free to do so. It's great to see how other people think about these things. What are you afraid of? Thanks, Lynn. It's a great one. The reason why I ask this is because the skill of inquiry, of question asking, of going in and getting under the surface of that thing is ultimately a skill that we can all practice and practice better every day. And one of the hacks I give some of the organizations I work with is find the little things you do every day that you've somaticized into this behavior that's not really interested anymore. Everyone wants to be interesting. Very few people want to be interested. I actually think being interested is more interesting. And so if you can start to find ways to be more interested, and this is a perfect example we all know too well after the last few years, you've all joined Zoom calls where you're waiting for someone to be the last one to jump in. And so you're sitting there chatting with your colleagues and you say, "Hi, Anita, how are you today?" And Anita gives you the same answer she's given 5 times because she's been asked 5 times. So she goes to that place in her brain where she's got that answer and gives it back. Change those little questions. Be more interested. And the one on that one that I like is, what's it like to be Anita today? Same benign curiosity. I promise you, you will get a more interesting answer every time. So check those little behaviors in yourself and see what little tweaks on the dial you can make to get to a different place.
1 minute.
The world's complex. It's going to remain complex. It potentially may get more complex in the years ahead. And I am probably the first to say, like, empathy is not the answer, but it can bring us closer to the answers that we're searching for. And so I hope this work and this practice kind of sparks something in you. And if it does, I'm always happy to chat more. Track me down at michaelventura.co and or LinkedIn or social media or any of the other things. I'm relatively findable. And I appreciate being invited in today. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Michael, especially since you're getting over a cold. So we appreciate you being here. It is my pleasure. Holy smokes, our last author of the day, Marie Miyashiro, who is the founder and president of Elucidity Network Incorporated, an empathy-based consulting and training firm that focuses on mindfulness in rehumanizing workplaces. She is a keynote speaker, trainer, consultant, and author of The Empathy Factor, Your Competitive Advantage for Personal, Team, and Business Success. She's gifting 1 ebook to the Empathy Summit, and it is my pleasure to pass the baton to you, Marie.
Aloha, everyone. Aloha from Honolulu, Hawaii. Here's your lei. I have fun doing that. I'm so pleased to be here today, and I am finding myself just kind of overwhelmed with all the beauty that's coming. And I just want to take a moment and invite you to be with me to just breathe in silence for like 15 seconds to just take it all in, because it's been so much words and energy and beautiful stuff, but I just want to integrate it if you want to join me. Just slowing down and calming down our nervous system for just a moment on this beautiful day we're having together. So I want to thank Anita. Pleasure to meet you. And also for all of you. And I'm so happy to be reconnected with Edwin again. So here we are. I'm sharing my screen. And I want you to see, I'm going to keep it in that format because I really like seeing all the people in the chat. And give me a moment here to get realigned. So I wrote The Empathy Factor back when there was virtually no research on empathy in the workplace. So that's my thing. It's my only thing. I don't do families or marriages or anything like that. I'm really focused on teams and the workplace. And I want to start by asking you a question, like Michael just did here. And that is, what is a secret ingredient that makes empathy real, in your opinion? What is a secret ingredient you think? There's no right or wrong answers. There's probably a bunch of answers. But in a moment, I'm going to share with you what I think one of the main answers is. and then we'll take a look at that together. All right. So this is a picture of me and my maternal grandmother, Kame Shimabuku, when, of course, I was much younger. This is on Ala Moana Beach Park here on the island of Oahu in Honolulu, where I grew up. And I wanted to show you this picture, and I've shown this picture to leadership teams at the highest level, C-suites, people who are leading multinational corporations that are global 400 companies. And I show this picture because my grandmother was an Okinawan shaman. So Okinawa is a southern part of Japan, and she was a Nodo priestess, and so was her mother and her grandmother. It's passed down the maternal line. My mother was not a shaman, and neither am I, but it kind of ended with her. But I show this to my clients when I'm working with them because I want them to know that I grew up in a house with my maternal grandmother, seeing the power of the invisible from a very early age. And that this invisible power, which we can call now empathy, is one of them. Love is another one that I think is so important, is something that is real and tangible. And we've all had experiences of it. And so I like to share a picture of my maternal grandmother to show that there's a way to make the invisible visible. Right? And so I've been fortunate enough, and let me refit this here. I've been fortunate enough to work the last 7 years, 8 years with a global industry leader where I went to 22 countries, over 22 countries. And this statistic was taken back in 2016. So these numbers are much higher now. And the program was still in implementation towards the end of 2023. And we trained 55,000 employees in empathy, 35 leadership teams, and over 300 trained the trainers. It began as a customer loyalty program, but it turned into cultural change. And what was really interesting about this that was different than what I knew as an organization development person who came to love and know empathy and incorporate that into my work for almost 20 years now, is that this program really went viral from the middle, not from the top. It had validation from the top in terms of a customer loyalty program, but it became so viral and people were clamoring to get into our sessions, and each country was telling the next country, you got to get in on this. So we found a way to make empathy transferable, repeatable, and scalable. And now I'm coaching and training empathy trainers from 15 countries all around the world to expand our scale. And you can find more about that program and me at empathiceurope.com. That's a nonviolent communication website. So this program is based on nonviolent communication, which was developed by Marshall Rosenberg, and this is his book. The process is over 40 years old. But my background is organization. And when I met Marshall in Atlanta back in 2004, and I heard him speak, the first thought I had was, my goodness, this method he has is the answer to everything. And I was shocked at how simple it was and yet how powerful it was. So it's being used at Forbes. His book and my book were included in this article, and there have been many articles in Forbes and other places about Microsoft and Satya Nadella using this particular method for his leadership team. So here's Marshall, and I loved, I can't remember which speaker it was, talking about both and, but you can have high productivity and human connection. This is what Marshall was talking about. And so he and I co-authored a chapter in the Change Handbook, which is a book that we were so honored to be in because it has things like open space and whole systems change and appreciative inquiry, all these great methods that are are far bigger and better than what we were doing. But it was a way to really look at and bring nonviolent communication, or NVC as it's known, into the fore. And you may or may not have heard of it, but it's surprising how few people have heard of it, given that it's one of the largest empathy practices in the world. It's in over 70 countries, over 700 nonviolent communication trainers. So it's something I'll tell you about how to get in touch with. So when you think of what is a secret ingredient that makes empathy real, I'd love for you to pop some things into the chat, because I would love to see what you're coming up with about what you think are some ways. Okay. And this is what comes up for me in nonviolent communication. So of course we have feelings. We know that empathy is some kind of empathic connection through feelings. Okay. So what Marshall did was revolutionary, because he connected feelings to something underneath. And this was my real aha moment. And that aha moment, yeah, we got attunement and spontaneity from Ellen. This was my aha moment from Marshall Rosenberg, is that beneath every feeling is a universal human need. This was revolutionary, because we've been taught and educated in a violent paradigm that teaches us that the cause of our feelings is what other people say or do to us, when in fact it comes from inside of us and in our own needs. It gives us so much more empowerment when we think of it that way. I know I've got a minute left. So I feel relaxed, for example, is a feeling. And underneath that, what is the feeling? Oh, my need for belonging. So when we get connected to this need, we can separate out what's happening around us into an internal process where we have empowerment and more choice. And that was a revolutionary idea for me. So this is a daily practice we can all do. And if you get in contact with me or go to our website, there's different ways we can really look at human needs. And we're not educated really in human needs. So this process, when we do the training with our groups, they have a hard time discerning what's the need underneath the feeling. And that to me is the secret ingredient, human needs. Because once we get connected to that, we're connected in our humanity, because we all have the same human needs. And they're active at different levels at different times. Okay, so here's another way to look at it, is there's these feelings coming out like, leaves, branches of a tree, and underneath them are all these basic human needs. These are not needs like wants and wishes and desires or requests, but actually more fundamental than that. So actually, everyone can get a free ebook if you'd like one. All you have to do is sign up at puddledancer.com and reference Marie Miyashiro, or email puddledancer.com. And you can check out more about nonviolent communication also at the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And I'll put this also in the chat for you. So that's me. And I'd love to get any hearts or thumbs up or emojis or anything that tells me you're still out there and listen to what I said and had some kind of connection with what I said. I would love that. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I want to let you know that I've actually taken training with you some plus 10 years ago, maybe closer to 15 years ago. You've truly been an empathy pioneer before it became sort of as popular as it is today. Now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Edwin, who's going to set us up for success for the empathy circles. This has been just truly breathtaking for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anita. Yeah, there we go. So up next is our empathy circle process. This is a space. You've been listening to a lot of speakers. I really enjoy hearing all these presentations. It really warms my heart to see this whole community coming together like this, because sometimes you can feel alone, or working on this, on trying to create more empathy in the world, and to have all these people come together and share their insights is just very heartwarming. Really has a real sense of community to it. So really enjoying this. And I'm going to post that into the chat, that if you can facilitate an empathy circle. If you've done an empathy circle before, add ECF after your name. So if you see my name says ECF, and I'm going to be creating these breakout rooms for putting us into these circles. And we'll also be recording. If you don't, some of the circles will be recorded. And if you do not want to be recorded, after your name, put NR for not record after your name. So so next I'm going to introduce Kathy Kidd, who's going to be facilitating this part, introducing it. So take it away, Kathy, to introduce one of our trainers for our Empathy Circle Facilitator training, and also a member of the board of the Empathy Center here in Santa Barbara. So take it away, Kathy. And I will work away making the breakout rooms in the background.
Okay, great. What a special morning. Gosh, my heart is just so open. So I want to briefly explain the process for an empathy circle, knowing that if you haven't done one before, the best way to learn is by doing it. So if you don't catch everything I'm saying, no worries. You'll be in the circle, and there'll be people in the circle that have been doing it before that will help you understand. So there are 4 basic roles: the speaker, the active listener, the silent listeners, and then the facilitator of the circle. And the facilitator is the person who keeps the time. I will be speaking for 3 or 4 minutes each. So the speaker speaks in short chunks. You want to not go on and on so that the person reflecting won't be able to remember everything you said. And the facilitator will ask you to pause if it looks like you're saying too much. And the listener can also ask you to pause. So we have the speaker gets to talk about whatever they want to talk about, although there usually is a topic in the chat, but you don't have to stick with that topic. And sometimes a topic will develop in the circle. And when it's your turn, if you want to continue that topic, you can. But if you want to talk about something else, that's your prerogative. So we have the speaker, the active listener. The active listener reflects what the speaker is saying. And if the speaker doesn't feel like that quite got what they were saying, you can say, that's not quite what I was saying, and you can try again until you feel fully heard. And so if you have a 4-minute turn, at 4 minutes, if I'm the facilitator, I'll hold up a little heart saying that time is up. Wrap up, the current thought that you have, and then you'll still get your reflection even though the time was up. So the speaker, the active listener, everyone else in the circle are the silent listeners. And silent doesn't mean that you're not doing anything. You're still actively listening. You're just not reflecting. So you're fully present, holding the space for the empathy and listening to happen. And then the other role is the facilitator, who will be guiding the circle. The facilitator may make some suggestions about the circle if there's a lot of new people in the circle. So you can look forward to that if you feel like you're not quite sure about what's going on. One of the challenges in this circle is that when you're listening, whether you're actively listening or a silent listener, you might want to offer something based on what somebody said, or agree with what they said, or say, well, I don't quite think that way, right? But that's not what we're doing here. We're only listening. And if you do have this burning desire to say something, when it's your turn to speak, you can share about whatever you want to share about. So just some quick final tips. When it's your turn to speak, express 1 or 2 short ideas and then pause for your reflection. The silent listeners stay fully present. If you have to get up and go use the bathroom or make some movement, turn your screen off, but don't turn the screen off the whole time. You're still actively present and listening and holding the space. And that's it. So I think we're going to get started in just a moment.
You can say a little bit more. I'm still making the rooms here.
Oh,
If
yes,
you want to
of
say anything
course.
about the benefits would be great,
Sure.
because I got to
Absolutely.
still working away on
Yeah.
the rooms.
So one thing I'll share is that the first time I did these circles, it was very uncomfortable because I was not used to just reflecting back what somebody said without, I studied NVC, and so there's always these empathy guesses you make, which can be very tricky. You don't have to do any of that. You just reflect back what you heard. You could even use some of the same words. And if it feels uncomfortable, just work past the discomfort, knowing that we've all been there before. This is not unique to you. I'm a therapist. I'm trained to listen, and it was still very difficult for me because it just felt so much different. I don't know why. And even as a therapist, I'm a good listener, and I learned so much more by being in empathy circles about being a better listener. So this really can increase your listening skills, which is the first step to empathy, to be fully present and listen. And as a silent listener, you can also test your listening skills, because as you're listening and hearing the reflecting, would you be able to do that? Were you really fully present and heard what was being said? And also, as part of being fully present is practicing mindfulness. So another part of empathy is being mindful and fully present, completely engaged with what's in front of you, and suspending judgment, such that when you suspend judgment, you don't even have this desire necessarily to respond. You're completely fully present with what their experience is, and your experience is way on the back burner. It's not even about, no, I don't think that's true. I don't agree with that. How could you say that? Oh yeah, that's true. I've been there before. It's none of that. So yeah, and we do have Edwin, are you ready?
I think we're set. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're
done.
going to let's see, where am I? What happens at this point, a lot of people drop out, so it's moving a lot of people around. And we're going to have, in terms of our time, we'll have about an hour and 10 minutes for this part, hour and 15 minutes. Then we'll bring everyone back and we'll have about a 15-minute debrief. So I've created the rooms, and sometimes there's a little bit of juggling here at the last minute. And so I'll be in the first room, room number 1, and room number 2 to facilitate will be Anita. Room number 4 will be Jonathan, and room number 5 will be Kathy. And we're going to head out into those rooms now and see you there.
Hello. All right, so you're all on mute. Maybe what we could do is unmute, introduce ourselves, and if anybody needs to take a stretch or a bio break before we get started, let's take a couple of minutes just to organize ourselves. So I'll start first. My name is Anita, and well, you know enough about me because I introduced myself at the beginning of the summit, but for anybody who joined late, I teach at McGill, and I am the author of this book. And Edwin and I go way, way back to 2011 when I first defended my thesis, and he interviewed me, and I thought, oh my gosh, I feel like such a VIP. I'm being interviewed about my book that maybe not my book, but two people read my dissertation. So that was an exciting day, and we've stayed friends ever since because I absolutely admire that he's just stayed so fully committed to the cause of empathy. Michelle, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. I'm Michelle Miller-Hauk, and I am a museum consultant. I work under a company called the Wonder Project, and what we're trying to do is design museums and public spaces for empathy and wonder. And so I've been involved in empathy summits with Elif Golik-Dim for a long time, and met her in Montreal, actually at the Association of Science and Technology Centers many years ago.
Cool. Nice to see you again, Michelle. Who wants to go next?
I can go. Hey everyone, am I on? My name is Francesca Donlin, and I am coming to you from cold Rhode Island. And I am so excited to be here. I feel like I've been like I was in the wilderness and like I just found all my people. I was a journalist for 20 years, and then I was a director of communications for tourism bureaus. But 3 years ago, I decided to teach a class at Florida Gulf Coast University called The Kindness Effect. No one had ever taught a class like that before. And I don't know why they let me teach it, but they did. And it became this big hit and everything. But then, because of politics and everything, they're threatening to take the institute, which is called the Roots of Compassion and Kindness, away. I can't teach my class anymore. And so, but in the meantime, giving away too much information, I got divorced after 25 years, moved to Rhode Island, and left my communication job because it's so toxic. And I decided that I was going to leap off a ledge and teach kindness to schools, and if they'd have me. And so they have, like, I'm doing it. And I was recently at the Naval War College. I don't know why they let me in either. And you should have seen their faces. It was like I was talking about, I don't know. It was like the words kindness and empathy at the Naval War College was just like, one man even said, what's happening here? Are we talking about wellness? Anyway, the Army and all military has the highest suicide and retention issues in the country. Anyway, so that's a lot about me, but I just want to say I'm so happy to be here with fellow like-minded souls, and I just am here to just inhale everything.
Sweet. Claudia.
Hello, I'm right now in Colombia. I do know the center and I know Edwin. I try to go to California when I have the chance. I do training nonviolent communication. That's how I learned about Edwin and empathy. And I love working with youth. I have a programming at school, and it works through mentoring. So they are mentors of their peers. And I also work with psychologists and trying to change culture for an organization that provides services for underserved population. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, very inspired for the summit.
Beautiful. Welcome from Colombia. Bill, last but not least.
Yes, Bill Coffin, Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm retired. Father of 4, grandfather of 7, husband of 1. I was at Anita's presentation in DC last year. I followed Edwin for decades, it seems like. And I actually teach couples how to be empathic, how to show understanding. So it was a joy to be here so far this morning.
Awesome. Okay. Everybody good? No bio break, no stretches. We're good to go. This would be the moment. Okay, good. Okay. So just by a show of hands, how many of you participated in an empathy circle before? Okay. So just who would like to be the first speaker and the first listener reflector? We have some volunteers here.
I'll do something.
Okay. Michelle and Francesca, can I pair you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a timer. You don't have to worry about the time, and I'm going to give you sort of a little, I don't know, maybe a heart to let you know that you're coming upon the time. We'll go for maybe 3.5 minutes for each pairing. And essentially, Michelle, would you like to be the first speaker? Or yeah, Michelle?
Okay, sure.
So just to remind you, what you'll do is, the hardest part of empathy circling is to recognize the need to speak in small sound bites. So you're trying to think of like 2 or 3 sentences max. And I will interrupt to help, at least in the early stages, because we're going to do this for about 45 minutes. And there's a learning curve for everyone. Okay, so apologies in advance. I don't mean to cut you off, but it's just sort of to help the process. And Francesca, your job is not to offer feedback, not to intuit like your own editorial commentary. You're just reflecting back. And like he said, you can use some of the same words, but you don't have to do it verbatim. You don't have to memorize it. It's the spirit of what you heard. And it's a back and forth, reflecting back. And then when the time is done, Michelle will become the listener, and someone else will join in as the speaker. Okay.
So tell me, remind me what the question is.
I think the question was something along the lines of, what was your biggest aha or takeaway from the morning?
Okay. And when do I know when I'm supposed to reflect?
When she stops talking, which will be after 2 or 3 sentences, like a little sound bite. And I will
Okay.
jump in just to make sure that it's possible,
Okay.
because we all have the tendency to go long.
All right. So my biggest takeaway this morning has been that it's been way too long since I have been in the company of people like everyone here. I took some work.
Stop. Yeah.
Yep.
So then I say, do I say Michelle? I hear, no, just, I'm hearing you say, that you realize that it's been a long time since you've been in a community of like-minded souls.
Yes. So I just go next. I just do the next thing. Okay. So, and what I am remembering about that is that it's very important to feed my soul in this way.
That being in this community helps feed your soul.
That is right. And I am reflecting on Maria Ross's assertion that the superpower for empathy needs to be used for good, because I think that often it is not used for good in this world.
Empathy is a superpower that should and can be used for good and not bad.
And just to go back to that first thing, that superpower seems to be used by good from all of the speakers, but in different ways, that the speakers are really coming at this from different ways, including workforce and personal and interpersonal and self-help and all of these different things. And that's very exciting.
It's exciting to see empathy as a superpower used in so many ways.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that focusing on who is practicing empathy in the world and winning, because I think that success is something that is so valued in the world that it puts a positive spin on having empathy as a skill.
Okay, so I think what you're saying there is that to see actual successes maybe validates empathy as a skill.
Yeah, it does. Yes. Yes. And it makes it more of a valuable an asset in a company setting, that you want to be able to have empathy in your leadership and your middle management and your individuals, so that teams work together and that you hit all of those innovation and success metrics that you're trying to look for. So it's an asset as opposed to a liability.
Empathy and showing the wins, it creates empathy as an asset that ultimately would appeal to more kind of companies in all levels.
Last round.
Oh, fast.
So this is the last, okay, last thing. Okay, good. So I also wanted to just say that I love the connection to nonviolent communication that Marie focused on, because it really does sort of get at the idea of that underneath this feeling that you're having is this deep basic human need, and to be able to sort of look at that and reflect on it and figure it out in your conversations is something that I think is a useful way of looking at it.
So I think this one is you digging deep to figure out how you respond or how you consider empathy but you also use the word nonviolent, which I liked. It incorporates sort of a nonviolent way of managing empathy. Is that kind of?
And communication. Yeah, and communication.
So Michelle, at the end of your speaking, if you want, you can offer to Francesca, I feel fully heard. It's a good practice, these empathy circles.
Yes, I think you heard me, and that it was scary to go first, but I'm good.
You killed it. You killed it.
So now we're going to rotate. Michelle is going to be the listener. Bill or Claudia, do either of you feel the impulse to speak next?
I can go.
Bill, great. Off you go. I'm going to set the timer. That was about 4.5 minutes, so we're right on point.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I mean, I might begin by saying I'm a graduate of the Naval War College. The off-campus program, of course, but I enjoyed this morning. I was a little bit frustrated because I didn't know whether to take notes, and I was somewhat distracted by the chat, and I realized I could have put it to rest so that I wasn't.
Stop.
So I think what you're saying is that there were lots of really good inputs and you were trying to focus on one or another, but that you saw yourself in the Naval War College conversation.
Yeah. Yes, and I saw myself in some of the presentations. I appreciate the work that went into orchestrating that and keeping everybody to 10 minutes.
So I think that you appreciated the organization and that also you saw yourself in it, and that was something that you really appreciated, because I think that that's one way of learning. That's how you are learning about it, is
Right.
seeing yourself.
And yes, and I'm an empathy fan. I actually do it sometimes, although sometimes I preach more than I practice.
Oh, so listening was important during this time for you because of the fact that you sometimes preach more than you practice.
Yes, especially with say my son or with my wife. I have a son with some mental difficulties, disabilities, and sometimes what he says is hard to listen to.
So sometimes the people closest to us are the hardest to have empathy with. Is that what you're saying?
For sure. And I appreciate it, even though I've been retired now for 13 years, I appreciated the need to include this in the workplace and the emphasis on teaching kids.
Oh, so the two different sort of that initial teaching of kids as they're coming through school, and then being able to take that into the workplace is something that you feel like is valuable or important to think
For sure.
about.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would make it a high school graduation requirement that kids would have to show understanding not only to their friends, but also to their parents.
Ooh, how would you, that's an interesting thought of being able to grade or make it a requirement in high school to be able to be empathetic.
Michelle, I'm just going to interrupt for a second, and I apologize to do this, but I know I have permission to make it a teachable moment. We have a tendency to make this feel more like a conversation and offer our own opinions or insights or interpretations. And the goal is to reflect back what you've heard. Yeah,
just listen. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and so I've been exposed to empathy from Bernard Gurney, now a deceased expert in marriage and family therapy.
So, sorry, go ahead.
And have been trained to, as one of the most important skills, to be able to show understanding to others.
So Bernard Gurney has taught you to, in a marriage and family counseling setting, to show empathy. Sorry, will you repeat
Yes,
that?
yes. Well, so I was reminded this morning when people talked about the various elements of empathy or various definitions of empathy that I was exposed to relationship enhancement, a form of therapy and a form of education, where empathy, being able to show understanding, is one of the 10 most important skills in relationships.
So it's important to show understanding in relationships.
Amen.
Amen. And that is time. Bill, if you want to say one final thing, feel free.
No, I appreciate the listening and the paraphrase and the understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just layer into this as a facilitator who took the training years ago. It's so much cognitive work to listen, right? So Michelle, I hope you didn't feel called out by my comment.
No, absolutely not.
Together. But
because I thought the same. Actually, after I said that one thing, I thought, oh no, I'm not doing the right thing. So I felt validated in that thought that you called me out. So no worries.
Super. Okay, so Bill, you'll be the listener for Claudia now.
I feel inspired on the diversity of the work on empathy. Very inspired on the diversity.
Okay, so it excites you that there's such a breadth of empathic work being done.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I visit the center because I want to implement the empathy tent in the park near my home with the kids I work with, and the idea was kind of loose, but now it's like I gain inspiration again.
So you're excited partially because you want to implement it near home. You want to have an empathy tent, and this is it kind of inspired you this morning to proceed with that.
Yeah, and I have a group chat with 4 mentors because they now are teaching the other kids, and one of them is studying psychology, and he will take the online circle facilitation with me, and I send them like the video and the PDF or the steps or these circles, and yeah, I'm gonna stop
So
there.
you've got a team of mentors and others that are going to do this with you, and you're trying to seed their knowledge so that everybody's on the same sheet of music.
Yes, and there was one speaker that mentioned that these last months have been difficult, and I have experienced, although I'm the one giving hope and inspiration to people, I have been feeling like that I need support from others and nurture. And this space gave me nutrition to continue, and I feel like renewal of why I'm doing what I'm doing, although it's difficult.
Right. Yeah. So it was a confirmation. It was food for the soul because you realize how important it is, and you want to do it well. And you were probably in a not a great place, but now you've been fed again and excited again because the importance of the work, especially
Yes.
with kids.
Yeah, and just the sense of community, because maybe I have been feeling lonely in this work, but it's kind of a reminder of you just need to show up and connect and talk to people, and then you will get like that. It's like the I don't know how to call it, but the food for that community gives to you when you are doing work that may be difficult.
right? Sometimes it's lonely and difficult work and you wonder what's the use, and yet when you show up and you're there and there's others there, it's like it's a blessing. It's a grace. It's energizing because you realize that you're not alone.
Yes. And finally, I love the data because I try to teach nonviolent communication to public hospitals, and it was really hard. It was really hard. And I was very unhelpful, and actually I didn't have like enough data to show them that it was important. And this summit gave me like cognitive information for people that say if you have empathy you cannot have accountability, and that it was mentioned, and I was like, oh, I want to research more how to show that you can have both empathy and accountability.
Right. Yeah, it's a both and. And you felt that you learned some things that might be helpful in your work with the public hospital, because some people are looking for the facts and the data, and you want to be able to bring that too.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Is that good, Claudia, if we end here?
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, we have one final pairing, and just to let people know, it usually takes about half hour before we stop feeling this is mechanical, because right now we're just learning the mechanics of the circle, and then you'll feel a shift where all of a sudden we'll be like at a deeper level of listening. So just hold tight for that. So Bill, you'll be listening for Francesca?
Okay. All right, here we go. So
just one point. I just listened. Was there somebody else that hadn't listened? Anita?
You just listened? Oh no, yeah, it's Claudia that's supposed to listen.
Yeah,
My apologies.
I was thinking that too.
My apologies, my apologies, my apologies.
So I do listen to Francesca. Okay.
You were so good at it. She just wanted you to do it again. Well, okay. Hi, Claudia. So actually something Claudia just said about it being lonely and finding yourself in a community of like-minded people is so empowering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that it's very empowering to be with people that think similar, and that it can feel lonely if you don't have it.
And it's so inspiring too, because it takes courage to do this. It takes courage to jump. I have a quote in my head that I live with that says, "Jump and the net will appear." And it just takes courage to do the work we do.
Yeah, like that you're connecting with courage, and that what we do needs that, and that you are remembering like that you just need to jump and the net will come, and it's like a reminder of that quote.
Yeah, thank you. And a couple of poignant moments for me was when, I hope I get their names right, Ian Roberts, first of all, came, talk about courage and just being available. But when he talked about how one of his students is now in prison, and that has impacted his work, really touched me.
Yeah, like that there was a specific moment with I'm bad with the names in English, but Roberts, and he's sharing touched you because he mentioned that what happened to his student has impacted his work.
Mm-hmm. And on a personal level, recently, I moved from Florida to Rhode Island for a big job. And I walked into an environment that was so toxic. I didn't know. And I tried every kindness technique that I had, and I couldn't fix it. So I had to leave for my own health. So I was at a low point.
Yeah, like that you're touching like a personal moment when you decided to move from Florida to the island for a big opportunity, and you tested all the tools that you have, but you realized you needed to leave because people won't change.
Right. And I had this belief that maybe it didn't work, that like empathy and kindness, even though I taught it for 3 years and I believe in it, maybe it isn't the answer. And then I realized, well, it is the answer. I just sometimes you have to leave a job, you know? And that's what everyone's reminding me here. Like, it's the answer. I know that it is. It's just I can't apply it to my experience. Just like Ian Roberts can't.
Yeah, like what I understand is that there was a moment that you thought, well, this doesn't work, but actually you kind of are more confident that it is, and maybe that's why you took the decisions that you made.
And that if he can have a student, if he can share that a student is in prison, you know, I can share that I left a job that was too hard, like too mean, was too mean. And that I'm finding that making me more passionate about finding empathy in workplaces.
Yeah, like his courage is giving you courage.
Yeah.
He shared that. I can share that I left that job, and that you have more passion about sharing empathy in workspaces.
My
last round.
Okay. My reputation, I was a communications director, was that I could work with psychopaths. That was my reputation. Like, give that person to Francesca. And I don't not only want to work with psychopaths anymore, I don't want there to be psychopaths. Like, I want to help someone else not have to work with psychopaths.
Yeah, like that in the past you were known for working with psychopaths, and now you're seeing and another energy of that people can leave, actually.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel very heard.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. We've done round one. I'll stay more out of the way now and let things flow, and we'll have time for one more round, I'm pretty sure.
Can't you do one too? Can't you do one too?
Want me to do one?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get in. Yeah, sure. Okay. So now we're what flow? So do you want to listen then, Francesca?
Yeah, I'll listen.
Okay, and then I'll listen to Michelle. Okay.
Okay.
I love meeting people who are attracted to the empathy space, and I'm so delighted that Edwin and I got to collaborate on this.
You're grateful that you got to collaborate on this because you so appreciate meeting people who are in this empathy space.
And I attended a conference in October about the inner development goals, which are meant to complement the sustainable development goals.
You went to a conference to learn the inner development goals that should complement the sustainable goals. Both terms I don't understand.
Yeah, the SDGs are the Sustainable Development Goals are like global goals from the United Nations to create a more peaceful and just world. And the Inner Development Goals was created from a foundation in Stockholm that recognized that to achieve outer change, we need to create inner change.
Okay, inner development goals is inner change, which you just learned. And the sustainable change is a much bigger not program, but
yeah, the United Nations, like
yeah, the United Nations program, bigger. Okay.
And empathy and compassion are one of the skills of the IDGs, but there are 23 skills in total. And there were like a couple of thousand people in the audience, and I found that maybe humanity can ascend.
That's really exciting. You found that there are 23 of these IDG, and that as a result of being in the audience, you felt like humanity can ascend.
Yeah, and I know the systems that are in place right now, capitalism, white nationalism, all that stuff is so powerful. But I feel that there's this nascent tidal wave of change coming from people who are just interested in more love and compassion and peace in the world. And I'm so excited.
You acknowledge that there's sort of a toxic layer or like wave or energy, but that you feel like there's the opposite, that empathy is rising up to meet or match or overcome the toxicity. Is that right?
Yeah, and I plan to write a second book, and I'm going to devote it to the exploring the inner development goals. And 2024 for me is about all the ways I can slow down and cultivate my inner change.
Oh, that's great. 2024 is about slowing down to cultivate your inner change, and that will translate into a book.
I feel fully heard.
Good, because that was a little tricky. You word to me.
Sorry, because you asked a question. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. All right, I can listen.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say from Francesca, I feel you in terms of being in a little bit of a toxic environment. I have one toxic individual that I'm working with right now, and I am looking forward and using this experience to jump into 2024 with a renewed and different focus on reading and writing about empathy and wonder.
Oh, so Michelle, you're feeling a degree of kinship with Francesca, who's talking about her toxic environment. And you are really excited for 2024 to be a year to explore empathy as a way of kind of, I don't know, now I'm interpreting. So repeat anything I missed, please.
It's just, I'm just looking forward to 2024 where I can get out of the toxic environment and start redoing again what I have wanted to do.
Right.
And I'm gonna probably cry too.
Well, you're touched about the hope you have for 2024 to sort of erase the toxic sludge in order to embrace and create space for more empathy.
Yes, I am. And I'm going to use all of them. I'm going to read all these books and and hopefully figure out a way to make a living doing something like this, because that was what the intent was to in starting the Wonder Project.
In starting the Wonder Project, the intention was to remove all of the toxicity and birth some new energy.
Focus on the wonder. Focus on helping the world find wonder, because I think that is what empathy is all about. Yay.
Help the world find wonder.
Yeah. I'm trying not to cry again. Yes, the world needs more wonder, and it is a way to empathy, I believe. It's the wow.
By rediscovering wonder and reconnecting with awe and wow, we can foster more empathy.
Yep, I do believe that. That is my guiding principle. And they're talking about guiding principles. I do think those are important. And yes, and I do feel a sense of belonging in this group, which I haven't felt for the last year.
You're feeling moved by the kinship and energy you're feeling in this space. Yeah, you're very touched by that.
Yes. And maybe you would give me a pass on listening for the next one, and I will come around later.
Yeah, we can definitely change things up. We can switch things up so you can gather your reconnect, reintegrate. Oh, that's so lovely. Oh man, look at us, eh?
It is.
Sorry.
But yeah,
All
thank
right.
you. I feel heard
Thank you.
and supported from even people that weren't talking. The smiling and nodding is helpful. Yay.
So whoever wants to go next in whatever configuration is fine with me.
Anyone? All right, I guess I'll do something. I guess, what did I do? I listened so I can talk. Who should I talk to? Bill?
Sure.
Okay, Bill, I'm going to talk to you. Okay. Well, first, I'm really touched by Michelle. And I wrote down, focus on the wonder. I'm going to focus on the wonder. That's it.
Yeah. So you also were touched by Michelle, and you're realizing focusing on the wonder is where it's at.
Yep. And I also think I came in here, this group feels great. I think I came in here with, a little imposter syndrome stuff. And there's I don't want to say few, but there's not a lot of people who have this passion and this drive to generate empathy. And so if that's your passion, then it's just real. You don't have to have a PhD in empathy.
So you were struggling with the imposter syndrome, but realized that if people showed up this morning, they were strong advocates of empathy, and who better to spend a morning with?
Yes, that is it. And then there was another person, wait, I wrote her name down, I probably shouldn't believe it. Dr. Nicole Price, who spoke about losing her mother and then to a drunk driver and then having to go through a trial. And I do think it's these dark moments that the post-traumatic growth piece that does offer value in the darkness. There's value. We can pull value from the darkness to share and teach others.
Yeah, so just even one of the presenters talking about losing their mom and then having to face the trial helped you realize how we all have difficulties, we all have darkness, we all have issues, we all have concerns, and yet there's a positive growth involved.
Yeah.
And possibility of growth in that.
In my class in Florida, I had some students who had been in school shootings. And my daughter was also involved in a school shooting a couple years ago. And one of the students said to me, oh gosh, now I'm just forgetting it. She said to me, you won't want this, but you will carry and use this someday. You will carry and use this someday for the betterment of someone else. And
Wow.
I'm just reminded of that today.
Yeah, so you're reminded of what one of the students said in one of your classes about a school shooting. That you'll remember and carry it, and it will make a difference somehow.
It'll make a
somewhere.
difference. Mm-hmm. Yep. And that I just have to keep remembering that we're all here to do that. We're all here to make a difference, and that's a gift. And that I have to not keep saying that my gift isn't real, that it's not shiny enough or bright enough. It's like, it's my gift and I have to use it.
Right. And you're aware of your gift, and it happens to be empathy and being able to be a teacher, and you still want to give it away.
Do. And that I love being in this little room with you, 4 people.
and that it's
Can we just stay here all day? Can we just stay here all day?
it's remarkable how the power of immediate friends and warm people lift our spirits.
That's it. That's all. That's how I'm going to end. Do I have enough? Is my time up? Okay.
Exactly 4 minutes.
Thank you. I feel heard and seen. Thank you.
Claudia, do you want to speak? Michelle, are you ready to listen?
Yes, I can listen.
It's my turn. Yeah, I can go ahead. I feel validation because yeah, there were some things mentioned like imposter syndrome or maybe some projects that needed to change and maybe they weren't how we wanted. And it's the sensation of validation of humanness what I'm getting.
You feel like your humanness has been validated by listening to both the speakers and us in this context.
Yes, because for example, I follow Mind Valley and there are a lot of people that do like wellness things, but I do like the content, but the marketing piece of Mind Valley is very like look like famous people and looks I don't know how you say that word in English, but luxurious, something like that. And it's like you see those people and it's like they are perfect. And it's disappointing. And I value like there is a process that maybe is not so easy and beautiful, but it still is a process and there is greatness in that.
So you have been following kind of this Mind Valley, but it's all about people that are aspirational people, not just like regular people. And you didn't say regular people, but I think that's what you're getting at. And you are feeling validated because of the journey of others that is similar to yours.
Yeah. Yes. And I do belong to a community of nonviolent communication practitioners and trainers. And one colleague told me there is a website called Hologram, I think. And it's based on pods, like people that actually connect deeply. And I have been thinking like I do want a pod that can have the empathy piece, but also like the creative way of listening to each other, but also maybe resonating in a way that we get inspiration, ideas, resources, like going from empathy to compassion in action, something like that.
So you are a member of a group of nonviolent communications folks, and there is a place called Hologram, perhaps, that has different pots of people, different groups of people that connect, and you would like to be part of one that talks about empathy, listening, and inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is
yes, because I love empathy. And I have been working with nonviolent communication and empathy for quite some years. And there is one group I belong that we have been studying like 2.5 years together. The group now is smaller, but just now, 2 years after, we are starting to collaborate with each other. So I would like, I don't know how to make to say that, but that empathy leads to creativity and actions to really enhance people's lives.
So you have been working with this one group, this one nonviolent communication group for about 2.5 years. It is, some people have fallen away, it's smaller. But just now you are collaborating with one another. And you do believe that empathy leads to creativity and sort of an approach to doing this work.
Yes, I'm gonna end that. I have seen like a lot of people talking like, oh, because of the wars and what is happening, like it's difficult, you know, like economy, all of that. And it's like, how can we, through empathy, kind of compensate what is happening? And I like, Anita, that you talk about the inner development goals, because I belong to a group in Colombia that is trying to study that. And it's an inspiration also to say, I need to be with people that have the same mindset, but also that are kind of doing projects, because right now it's like, I want action. I want to do things, because it's like, for example, my project with the school, like if I don't have funding, I cannot continue with that work. So it's mixing, I don't know, like corporate and soft skills, something like that. And that's my wish.
So you're particularly interested in the economic impact of wars and how empathy can have an impact on that. And that is tied up in your study of the UN sustainability. Tell me, Anita, what that's called? UN sustainability goals. And you're doing that in Colombia. But you're really interested in actionable items, projects, and how to fund them, and how to sort of activate the resources around funding of those groups.
Yeah. I just have to say that it's not that I'm doing that. It's just that I'm in the phase of, I train a lot in empathy and kind of a passive way of listening to people. And now I'm realizing empathy can be more active through questions and active through actions after you listen to a person, right? Because if you listen deeply to a person, I don't know, what it comes is like, what can I share with you? How can we support each other, right? Like,
Yeah, sure. So you've been doing a lot of listening and learning about empathy, and now you're interested in how you can put that into action.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel heard. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Claro.
Gracias.
Claudia, would you like to listen? I have stuff I want to share. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I had a very, very overwhelming 2024 in a good way, because my book launched and I went on a book tour, but I was exhausted, and I made sure that 2024 would be like quieter.
Mm-hmm. So last year was very exhausting, because you have the launching of a book, and now you are kind of intentioning, I want this year to be different. Mm-hmm.
So back in September, when I said to Edwin that I'd like to help him with this, like the summit was months away. And then all of a sudden I was working through the holidays.
Yeah. Like when the idea came in September, you thought it was going, like you will have plenty of time, but you ended up working on the holidays for this summit.
Mm-hmm. And for 4 hours, my husband has taken my daughter to a bookstore or a library. And I kind of had a mixed feeling about excitement to do the summit and resentment that 2 days before she goes back to school, I'm not with her.
Yeah, like that your husband is helping you to be with your daughter at the library, but you have mixed feelings of, excitement with this summit, but also anticipating that your kid is gonna go to school in 2 days and you want to spend time with her too.
And I've been savoring the summit, and I'm especially grateful for the circle, which I actually, coming into this, thought I had ambivalence about, even though I know that empathy circling is powerful.
Yeah, like you are kind of grateful for the group, and when you were coming you were ambivalent because you know it's powerful. And I guess yeah, I don't want to interpret, but it was mixed feelings.
And what I have decided to do, thanks to all of you and the degree to which you've shown your vulnerability, is that when my daughter and husband come home, I'm going to be extremely present for them.
Yeah, like kind of the inspiration of sharing vulnerabilities, that you decided that once they come, you're going to be fully present for them.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Thank you, Anita.
I also put in the chat the links to the SDGs and the IDGs in case anybody's interested.
Thank you.
Isn't it always an interesting tension around how much we want to do and how much like we are able to do in 24 hours while also striking the balance between like self-care and being caring? Anybody have a recipe?
I wish.
Bill, you've been married longest, my sense is, forgive me by being bold about that, but what is your secret sauce?
Yeah. No, there is no answer. But yeah, I was struck by your honesty about being torn, even about the circle. And I almost, and my tendency is, well, the content's over, I can skip the last 2 hours. And I almost clicked off, partially because I never alerted my wife, who's now in the kitchen, that I was going to spend 4 hours talking about empathy. And she's wondering, what about me? But the idea of being present to the people in our lives, and as somebody said before, it's almost more difficult to do that than it will be to others. I remember a poster on the wall of the Department of Education building at the University of Maryland when I went for a master's in counseling a long time ago. And it said, do you ever feel like you needed a counselor more than you wanted to be one? And sometimes, yeah, that's it. We need somebody to listen more than we want to listen. And the difficulty that I have found, even though I teach it, and I admitted it before, not always being able to practice what I preach in terms of, because Pat and I are different people, different ideas, different priorities, different thoughts, different feelings, different reactions, and being able to take her perspective, look over her shoulder, see the world through her eyes is I need to remind myself that that's what I need to be doing sometimes.
Anita, I have to tell you that my word of the year was present last year, and I failed miserably at it. So I'm trying to figure out how to do better. And my husband would tell me that he's the one I'm worst with because I'm most comfortable with him. You're muted.
Sorry, I was just saying that's the irony. And you know, like all of the feels that I have right now where I'm like, oh gosh, when they walk through the door, they're going to feel so much love, you know? But it could happen that she'll walk through the door and she'll say, Mommy, I got to run to the bathroom. And then he's going to ask me something. And then all of a sudden, like the feels will somehow be like vaporized, you know?
Well, it never stops. My children are 29 and 25, both girls. And I just spent 3 weeks with them and I'm sort of like, it's time for you to go home.
Anita, could I ask you a question about the empathy circle technique?
Yeah.
My practice is to let people talk for a paragraph and then empathize in a word or two or a phrase or two. And it seemed somewhat stilted when it's, hey, you speak for a sentence or two and I speak for a sentence or two. Any thoughts or reactions?
Yeah, because we only went on for maybe 2.5-ish rounds. So I don't know if we hit a full hour, but I've done with the training, you do like blocks of 2 hours and you do that 4 times. And what I discovered is that actually being present to hear what someone else is saying in order to reflect back requires so much cognition that it just reminds you of how we're always being triggered in our brains by whatever somebody is saying and how it relates to you. That's how our brain works. So we actually have to have a conscious effort to move that away and always come back to the person speaking. And the practice of doing that over and over and over again changes how you listen. And so we just went through the mechanics of doing it for a very brief period of time. But if you were to do rounds of it for a longer period of time, there would be, you would have like, it's like, I don't know, shifting a gear in a car, you would feel something change. And then when you come back and do it a second time, like a week later or 2 weeks later, again, you have to be reminded of how that shifts gears. And, you know, Edwin now I've noticed over the years, because he's done so many of them, he naturally reflects back. So you always feel heard around him. And it's changed how he interacts with people. So I think it is really a practice.
Because we always think about yes and is the strategy that you're trying to, at least we're trying to do in our company. It's like never no, always yes and so that is what the muscle is for me now.
But what happens if it's no?
Yeah, you just have to figure it out.
I just wanted to mention something that I know for the person who is expressing, maybe you feel like cut out in a way, but also I think it's a great practice because, for example, sometimes I mediate conversations and actually cutting the sentences and slowing down the conversation brings more connection and understanding that if you let the person talk for a long time. And actually that's something that I'm trying to learn with my partner, like we don't do monologues because then it's like I don't know where he was saying or what I was thinking, but if we try to pause each other, but it's difficult and it takes like a lot of patience if I'm actually passionate about something, that I do it shortly, or he does it. It's complicated, but I think it's a interesting practice.
I don't want to jump too much in here and let it be about my voice, but Claudia just said something that made me think that it's worth sharing, that the concept of the empathy circling really began for at least for Edwin and the group that started it around conflict resolution. So they intentionally brought people who were like on political divides, and the act of having to repeat back what you heard when you disagree fundamentally with what somebody has said actually changes how people listen differently, because our brains cannot be in a state of anxiety or provocation or because we've got, adrenaline going through our body. So we don't listen to understand. So slowing down to repeat back what somebody said actually changes our body chemistry, and we can listen differently. So that's another part of it. Yeah.
And there's actually an organization now that teaches people how to do that around political issues. Have the left talk to the right, called Braver Angels.
Oh, let me look that up.
What's the name? Braver
Angels.
Braver Angels.
Is that the Canadian woman? Oh, no.
No, this is a group out of New York, or David Blankenhorn is, and the guy that does the communication skills training is a marriage and family therapist, Bill Doherty, out of the University of Minnesota.
Anita, I think the woman you're thinking of is the woman in DC that does the dinners with people. Maybe not.
No, I don't even know about her. I'm trying to remember the name of this woman. She's a Muslim woman who wrote a book that got a lot of backlash because she's gay and doesn't wear the hijab. And this is like 20 years ago when she came out. She was on the media circuit, CNN and a whole bunch of other things. And she trains kids in particular how to take a beat and learn how to breathe. Anyways, it's a really extraordinary work that she does too. Well, I know he's going to call us back shortly.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Kara's going to be facilitating this next debrief section. Take it away, Kara.
And I'm just going to call everyone by name and invite you to unmute and come share your experience. Take about 30 seconds and just let us know what was your experience inside the empathy circle. I'm going to start at the bottom of my screen. So Carol Henderson. You have to unmute so we can hear you.
Oh, Doug, I wonder if there's can everybody unmute? Are you able to unmute, or there's some kind of a setting for, maybe there's that.
I can unmute.
Okay, everybody can.
Okay.
All right.
Well, then I will start with who I can see faces of. That makes sense, right? Cecilia.
Ooh, use my face. Yeah, once more important for me is that the underlying feelings can be spoken and talked about, and that was happening, and yeah, major. Thank you.
Ritu. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did. It was a great experience, a lot of learning, a lot of feeling and emotion. And I'm looking forward to the upcoming ones too. And thank you.
Yes. Sylvie.
Thank you. My internet connection is a bit wacky, so I'll be brief. First of all, Anita, merci beaucoup. It was enlightening, and as I said, I was with Carol and Kathy. And as I mentioned, and I've shared some stuff that I never thought I would share with strangers. So my point is as follows. Empathy does work because I felt in a very, very, very safe space.
Oh, yes. Kathy.
Oh, yeah. Every time I'm in one of these circles, I'm just so amazed by how deep the sharing is and how, big the heart space is. And I had all new people, so it was really a pleasure introducing people to the circle. And everybody did great. So, and they were so kind in my facilitation when I made suggestions. So I appreciated that.
Love it. Claudia.
Yeah, very deep, inspired, and like a renewed energy. Thank you.
Jonathan.
Thank you. Today's presenters may have solved a problem for me. And I have a question for the presenters. In the books, do you mention an empathy circle? And I'm going to follow up on all of the books and all the authors to find out if this practice is actually mentioned or in the books or in some modified form in the books. So today's experience was very valuable, and I'm looking forward to next week. Thank you.
Beta.
It's Beata.
Beata.
I really enjoyed today's summit. I found the speakers very interesting, and I took a lot of notes, probably like 20 pages of notes, because they gave me a lot of new ideas. I could see that some of the concepts discussed were actually the same as in previous empathy circles. So we talked a lot about empathy in the corporate world. We talked a lot about cognitive empathy, and that's actually very encouraging for me that we focus more on the cognitive empathy than affective empathy. And also I've learned a little bit about people who lack empathy. That was something new that was discussed, the people with empathy deficiency disorder. I think that's what's mentioned. So that's something that I'm going to look into because I've never come across it before. So in general, lots of new things, lots of new ideas. When it comes to the empathy circle, it was very emotional and sometimes very challenging when it comes to the formats. So that was also a very interesting experience. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Ruth.
Yes, today was it was so powerful listening to all these words of wisdom from the authors, and I'm very grateful for that. And same as Beata, I wrote pages and pages of notes. So I'm very grateful to be a part of this. Thank you. And I really look forward to next week. Thank you.
Rob.
Thanks. Yeah, the empathy circle was really supportive. I think Edwin was with us, so there was gratitude for organizing this. And Anita, if you were with us, we would have expressed the same. And Kara, we were all recognizing the amount of work that goes into this, but also how much we were all learning and the history that's there with the within the practice of empathy and the journeys. And I think it was Mary who pointed out many of us had a kind of trauma related to work, starting with Slim, our first speaker, where clients weren't getting it or a boss wasn't getting it. And there was something that was happening that triggered us to dig deeper into this empathy topic. Jonathan, to your question, I can't recall off the top of my head. My book came out 2 years ago. I can't recall if I mentioned the empathy circles then, but when I talk about empathy, and the opportunity comes up, I do reference the empathy circles quite a bit because they are really powerful, as we all experience today. So thank you for having me, and thanks for letting me participate.
Thank you. Mary.
Yeah, the whole day was fantastic. The empathy circle was amazing. Every empathy circle, I just gain more and more self-confidence around around the necessity of for me, it's self-empathy. I'm talking about myself, but also I'm learning about, all of you guys and all the people that have already been dealing with this for years and years, and your amazing books. And really want to thank you for writing your books. Thank you. And sharing.
Yes. Francesca. Tell you right.
Yeah. Hi, I've never been to an empathy summit, and I've never done an empathy circle, and I loved all of my people, and I loved Anita hosting our empathy circle, and I learned so much today. I'm so inspired. I just can't wait to learn more, and I appreciate all of you being here and creating this space. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Michelle.
So I struggled a little bit at first with the process of just repeating back without reframing, because much of my work is about listening and then reframing and sort of trying to repeat back, but kind of in a different way. And so that was a little bit of a struggle for me to start out with, but I really felt when I spoke that I was so well heard and supported, even in the roughest part of it for me. So I really appreciate my wonderful, wonderful group and Anita's leadership in our learning of this process. Thanks.
Thank you. Anita.
So there's a lot of talk about these two kinds of empathy. Cognitive empathy is our, capacity for perspective taking. And that's sort of the one that I tend to gravitate towards because that's a choice. But the empathy circle for me just now was like a chance for me to feel the affective empathy of like feeling what someone else is like resonating. And that was a good feeling. So I'm just grateful for that.
Thank you. And Edwin, we'll get your share and then we'll pass it back to you.
Okay, I think there's some people that didn't have cameras on. Do you want to try calling them or?
Ellen has said pass. Rofe, oh, I hope I got that name right, posted into the chat. And Carol, with your permission, I'd love to share what you shared with me in the chat. And otherwise, it's just straight back to you.
Okay, it's just us. Okay, just want to be sure that somebody said they didn't have a camera and a microphone. So yeah, it's very exciting. We've been doing a whole series of these summits, and the team keeps growing bigger. Just really great to work with Anita on this too, and the new volunteers. So it's very heartwarming sense of connection. There's a lot, as I was mentioning in our circle, a lot of stress because of keeping all the balls and the trains running on time. So but I was able to share that, and as soon as I did that, it's like then the more the emotion, the deeper gratitude and other feelings came up. So with that, we want to go next into the closing part of our so the next steps of what we're doing next. And I'm going to post into the chat a whole list of sort of next steps that you can take, ways you can take part in our empathy movement. And the first is that the recordings of this summit will be online at the event page. And then you can see that's the URL. Go to empathysummit.com and go to the January event, and we'll eventually be putting all the video recordings there. The next summit dates are there too, and the full program. So all the speakers are at that same URL. You can visit the empathycenter.org and see our visioning circles for a list of events that we're holding here and online, as well as there's a schedule, Google alert, a Google Calendar event, Google Calendar for worldwide events. So a lot of different groups are holding empathy circles, and if you're holding a circle, you can post your events there because we want to create a space for you to get the word out. And actually, we have a weekly visioning empathy circle. So for developing the Empathy Center here in Santa Barbara. So we're actually going to be doing that in an hour in the same Zoom. So we'll have a little empathy circle just to, for you to hear about the center and to share any ideas for it. It's usually a kind of a smaller group. And did I put the feedback form? I hope yeah, I'll put the feedback form here. So this is if you're wanting to receive books, and it's I think everybody's going to get a book. It's like, Oprah, you get a book, you get a book, you get a book. You're all going to get, something, I think, if you fill out that feedback form. And I think you're going to get multiple books too. And then, and then I think Anita, did you want to talk about the club? I think you had the book club, and you had a slide or something to share for that.
I've put it in the chat. Thanks, Edwin. So on the last Friday of every month, I'm going to try to host an Instagram live event with the book authors. So the first one in January is Michael Tennant. He'll be a speaker next week, if I'm not mistaken. And I've also included in the chat the posters for day 2 and day 3 of the summit, so you can see the lineup of speakers. Edwin, thank you so much for your leadership, not only for this summit, but for your decade plus commitment for the cause of, trying to scale empathy in the world. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you all to the speakers. Rob, you're the only speaker right now here, but everyone who participated, I'm grateful. And all the participants who took, a block of 4 hours from their life this Saturday to commune over, I think, what could change the world.
Okay, now I'm going to put one more time the feedback form. Click on that form right now, and then we usually give some jazz hands, a goodbye, just a little mirror. So thank you, everyone, and fill out that form, and see you next week. Same place. Bye.
Bye.